Good morning, one and all. We are starting with the day 5 of our online FDP on impact of literature on youth in the current situation, conducted by Pratibha College of Commerce and Computer Studies and supported by Savitribai Pune University, HRDC. I welcome you all on a bright morning today. I have two panelists today, two technical sessions, and we will start with the first session immediately. I request Mrs. Aparna Goswami ma'am to kindly introduce our today's speaker for the day.
Good morning, everyone. Respected Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, yes. You
Hello?
are audible. Yes, you are audible.
Good morning, everyone. Respected dignitaries, resource persons, the organizers, and my co-participants. I'm Aparna Goswami from DK College, Mirza, Assam. In today's first technical session, I take the privilege to introduce our honorable resource person, Madam Surudha Kulkarni. Madam is a corporate trainer in behavior domain, a motivational speaker, and a media trainer. She is the founder partner at Marvelous Training Forum, at an HR training company that specializes in training manpower. MTF, located at Wakad in Pune, boasts of having a state-of-the-art training rooms. MTF has trained the staff of companies from various sectors like real estate, pharma, IT, ITES, animation, manufacturing, and education. Madam has a total work experience of 25 years. She has been associated with more than 12 undergraduate and postgraduate departments of colleges across Pune as a visiting faculty member. Some of these are Garware College, the Indira Group of Institutes, MIT School of Media, MCA Department of JSPSM, Ferguson College of Animation, etc. She has trained more than 8,000 trainees so far in areas like English and communication skills, customer service, leadership, business communication, content development, journalism, and public relations. Madam is also a writer and has worked as a journalist with Times of India, Bangalore. She has also worked as a corporate writer with ad agencies of repute, newspapers, magazines, and public relations organizations. She has also lent her expertise to high-profile individuals, political parties, and many other clients in the field of public relations. As a journalist, Madam has to her credit a vast experience in the field of celebrity interviews. She has interviewed film and theater personalities, politicians, scientists, CEOs of business establishments, and so on. Currently, Madam is in the capacity of Chief Mentor and Partner at Marvelous Training Forum that follows a unique method of training employees and corporate professionals in behavior domain. Madam holds a master's degree in mass communication and journalism from Karnataka University. She also holds multiple certifications from Government of India, such as Dale Carnegie from Xavier School of Management, Jamshedpur. She is associated with British Council and is a fellow of the Indian Society for Training and Development. Thus, we have a dynamic resource person for today's session. On behalf of everyone, I would like to request Madam to enlighten us with her valuable deliberation. Over to you, ma'am.
Ma'am, yes.
Good morning. Good morning, Bhushan. Warm welcome to everyone, and thanks so much, Team Pratibha. And as I begin, let me just compliment the entire team from Pratibha Institutes, Bhushan sir, Agra sir, Sonali ma'am, Rupa ma'am, and a wonderful intro by Aparna ma'am also. Thank you so much. It indeed flatters us, when this intro is given and peps us up with energy when we are about to begin the session for the morning. Before we begin, I'd just like to take a 10-second test on sharing the screen, sir, please, if you don't mind. Let's just have a small screen test.
Sure.
So can you just make me the co-host so that I just
Yes,
start?
ma'am.
Yeah.
You can, you can.
Okay. Yes. I think it's gone online. My slide, has it gone online?
Yes, ma'am,
Yes,
it
yes.
is.
Okay.
It is.
So let me just put it on the slideshow mode.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And honestly speaking, I feel extremely privileged and extremely honored to be a part of this wonderful FDP program. I've been seeing all the wonderful panelists and I've taken a lot also from their sessions. Thank you, Team Pratibha. Thank you, University, and the most wonderful audience, consisting of all very learned students. For us right now, students, but learned people from literature domain, professors. Well, as we all know, the topic for today is the evolution of literature in the new millennium in the country. But before that, let us try and understand as to what is it all about. What are we going to do over the next 1 hour? So what is it that we can expect? Please excuse us now because we've shifted online and it's no longer a very, this is not a very interactive platform where we can have question answers and expect your answers when we ask questions. But let us try and just explore what is the way forward. What is it that we expect to happen over the next 1 hour or so? So what's the state of literature in the new millennium in the country, as I said, and why are we here? What are the factors that have driven us here? Let's have a peek into the past and connect the dots with the current situation. That's something that we're going to do. The trends in the print industry today. So how included do we feel in the print industry and the publishing industry in the country? So let's have a look there. Why literature as a career choice? Yeah, that's a very important question and a very pertinent one, which is going to help all of us here. And of course, what is the role of teachers in today's for today's generations, and what is our role, and how are we going to drive them for their future careers? So speaking of careers, dear participants, what's a dream job or what's a dream career? Let us go back 30 years in time. Let's go back to circa 1970, 1980 till about 1990, where right before independence and even after independence and those eras where technical careers actually meant everything in terms of money, in terms of rewarding positions. Also, they meant a lot in terms of social status. Do we remember when, especially in some communities, how, say for example, in some communities in Andhra Pradesh and in some communities in North India, or across India, let us say, how doctors had a big value put on their head. So when a Dr. Bloom was about to enter alliances, about to enter matrimony, he would get a lot of dowry. So, seriously and jokingly both, that was the worth of a doctor or an engineer also in this country. There was no other choice because people had to resort to technical careers to make big money. If we look at the very famous Maslow's hierarchy of motivation needs, why are people motivated to work at all? What is it that drives us? And Maslow has given us a fantastic inverted pyramid where the first thing is roti, kapda or makan. There's no two ways about it. We all work for roti, kapda, makan, which is our physiological needs. Once that is set, then we want safety, security, all kinds of safety and security, including social security. Of course, then comes love and belonging, right? So let us look at, say, people like, say, for example, Salman Khan. He's got a lot of money, he's all safe, he's secure, he's doing so fantastic in his career, and still single, correct? So the meaning is, roughly speaking, love and belonging come after roti, kapda, makan, safety, all those things. And then we all have that ego to boost. So towards this end, we have a self-esteem to feed, and we have self-actualization needs, which means that all of us also need to have some kind of a social place. So we all work towards becoming more and more successful. We want more and more everything. So that's how technical careers actually helped in achieving all this, not so much of arts careers. And why so? Because what would a person do after doing his or her arts degree? Okay, so some people would go get into civil services. Some people say, for example, BA ho gaya to kya? So what we do is once the degree is there, we go ahead and we do either a teaching job, or what we do is we do BA LLB, and maximum is we would get into clerical jobs across banks, across insurance companies, public sector, private sector, all those. So this kind of a trend was there till about mid 90s. Okay, let's be fair enough, say at least till early 90s. So the takers for arts and humanities had to actually compete a lot with people from technical backgrounds in the growth, in taking the growth ladder up. Let's go next. Now, these two people, I need not say their names, we all know them. And now some people decided to jump the gun, and they decided to cross fences, and they said that that's enough. We may be from technical backgrounds. For example, this person on the slide, he's so famous. He's one of the most influential, one of the most, he comes in the 100 most influential persons in the world. So Shri Chetan Bhagat, what he said is, I don't want to stick to my technical career. I want to make a career in writing. Now, that was some kind of an indication that creative careers also were taking shape towards the turn of the millennium, a little before that, and towards the turn of the millennium in the country. There's no introduction needed to the most famous J.K. Rowling, who also is Joanne Rowling, and her story is extremely inspiring. All that she built up a wonderful empire out of her own creativity, her vision, her power to create stories, the narrations, the detailing, and all those things. And she is not just one of the most influential writers, authors, she's the richest author till date, but she donated her money to charity. Otherwise, she would have always topped the charts. So some people actually go beyond their needs, and they're constantly motivated to create something. Now, this turn is it's a milestone in the history of careers in India. As I said, it was not just technical careers any longer, but with the turn of the millennium, it was also careers in humanities. Let me just give you a small example as to what happened with my own family when about 3 years ago, when my daughter passed out of HSC with humanities. Her score was not bad. She had scored about 83% from the humanities stream, and we were very proud of her. And we wanted a seat, like all parents do. We wanted her to go to the most famous Ferguson College in Pune. And the ranking list showed her number as being 121, as being on 121. And my daughter stood at number 121 for humanities stream. I guess 121 is not such a bad number at all. But the problem was, we tried a lot, and finally the principal was seeing parents, addressing parents, and he was taking one case after the other. And when I stood in the queue and I pleaded, I said, sir, please. And she's very sure that she wants to do a career in psychology. And sir said, you ask me a seat for BSc, any stream, I'll give you. You ask me a seat for any other technical program, I'll give you. Please do not ask me a seat for BA. It's impossible. Because children who have scored even 90% are in the queue. And all those children came from sciences background, but that's a different story. But those backgrounds also, they all culminate at humanities, and more children are taking to humanities as a career option. Now, that was a very big revelation for me. Yeah, that told a big story in terms of career choices, how the ball is rolling in favor of humanities and arts careers. So you no longer have to be just a teacher, or you no longer have to celebrate that day saying, "Ma, aaj main BA pass ho gaya, ab meri shadi karwa do," types. No, that is not the case any longer. People have started looking at humanities as a very big career choice, a very rewarding career choice. And these careers offer much more than just roti kapda makan. So the key lies in staying motivated at all times. If you have dreams, if you have goals to meet, if you have the motivation to go, you can do wonders in humanities. There's no two ways about it. Don't worry, you don't have to depend on IS exams alone to make a big name in society. This brings us to the question as to what is it, what do you mean by the print and print industry? Where do we stand? Which industry do we really belong to? Now, this is a very surprising thing, because we all people from media industry, as I said, as was introduced, well, I began my career as a journalist. I have written a lot, and I know print industry quite in close quarters. I've seen the industry, I've worked in the industry, and I have seen its evolution from the time where we were using, in times of India, where we're using the old-fashioned hand, our copies used to be typed on typewriters, and overnight it was shifted to computerization. I was part of that generation, and I'd like to call myself belonging to the dinosaur generation, because the new millennials, they don't understand the challenges that we faced. Well, so back then it was just a simple humble press and publishing, but now we all belong to the very glorious, very booming media and entertainment industry. Yes. So what are the sectors that are covered by this industry? It's not just media industry alone, it's media and entertainment. So all the sectors that fall under entertainment, for example, acting, filmmaking, music, then there is a lot like gaming, online gaming. All those sectors fall under this very large industry segment called as the M&E industry. Print also falls under this, and no matter whatever happens across the world, let's not speak about the current situation the world over, because for some time there is a jack on print publications for the simplest reason that there's no advertising. So most print publications in the country and the world over are suffering. Well, they had started suffering even before Corona happened in America, but in India it was going very robust. It's a very robust segment in India. And why and how there are certain surveys and there are certain references. So there are certain reasons. We'll come to that later, but the most important thing is print industry is very much a part of the media and entertainment industry. Right next to television, it attracts advertising. And because it attracts advertising, and it will still continue to attract advertising, even till 2022, 2021, surveys tell us that it will still continue attracting advertising. It takes 48% share of advertising revenue that is spent, which means that once print is strong, all the platforms in print are going to be strong. So print consists of books, online journals, newspapers, everything that is printed. So this industry by itself consists of about 1 lakh publications which are registered for publishing. So they may include magazines, they may include newspapers, they may include journals. Now journals, there is a lot of journal activity in India in all areas. So plus there is a lot of magazine activity in India. You take from A to Z. You say any name. So if I say, suppose if we were to say utter the alphabet D. So for example, decoration. So home decoration. We will find a lot of magazines for home decoration alone. If we say H randomly, anything, so we'll find a lot of things on home, housekeeping, like that. So there's a lot of magazine activity happening in India. There's a lot of journal activity happening in India. Registered, unregistered, everything, but registered, the number is more than a lakh, which was about 80,000 just about 7-8 years ago. It was 80,000. Today it stands at 1 lakh plus, which means that the segment is seeing a healthy growth and it doesn't have to worry about readership at all, because there are a lot of factors. We'll come to those factors later. So print industry alone comprises of so many careers for so many people who know writing, correct? So magazine writing, it's all literature. So anything that we write and publish is literature, whatever format. So earlier people would write novels, but now you can write political literature, you can write your own specialized, in your own specializations, we can write articles, we can contribute to so many, every business organization has their own house organs, they are called as. So the activity that's happening is beyond our imagination. And this, when I say print, the platform is print, but literature activity is happening all over on internet also. Let's speak about that also. So let's try and understand that print is here to stay and to grow for various reasons, and here to offer us a lot of careers in this field. So what happened? Why did this segment grow a lot? This segment grew a lot for a lot of reasons, and those again let's explore in detail a little. But let's try and understand essentially that we have a huge boom in the 3G, 4G, and portable devices. We have a large number of people using not just devices but broadband and Wi-Fi connections. So our service providers are very benevolent. They are giving us very good at cheap rates. We have internet made available in the recent times in India. Plus, the government has increased FDI limit from 74%. Now, FDI is something which is very important. If there's no policy support and if there's no foreign direct investment in any sector, things don't work out. So everywhere in print industry also, most newspapers, if we go online and we try and explore their ownerships, it's also foreign direct investment, which is there. So across the industry, there is a lot of foreign direct investment. Even in publishing industry, there's a lot of foreign direct investment. And all companies who have invested in India directly and indirectly need a lot of literature in various forms, So what are those forms? We'll see, as I said, as I promised, let's see those forms later. So essentially speaking, it's the strong policy support for growth, a lot of attractive opportunities for this medium to grow. And generally, many people are now investing a lot in this sector. So that's why there's a robust demand, and this demand is not going to die down. For temporarily, I think we are all online, but soon as this Corona Sankat Mahamari goes away, I am sure we are going to again go back to times where we have a mixed sort of, again, we're going to go like, go back and forth, online, offline, those kinds of things. Now, someone has raised his or her hand. Dr. Sopan Subase, is there any question or any problem? Rupa ma'am? Okay, shall I continue?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. You continue.
Yeah. So what happened is now there is this an LPG gas cylinder. What does it remind us of? Now, the big India, when I say the big India LPG story, I know what bells it rings. I know all of us here, especially the husbands here who are in this program, have definitely, at least if not cooked, at least switched on off their gas cylinders umpteen number of times. Come on, you have to agree. And I'm sure all of us have been busy cooking. There's no doubt about it. So when we say LPG, it reminds us of the lockdown period. When we say LPG, homemakers like me will definitely think of, oh, have I booked my cylinder? But are we talking of this LPG? Does it ring any bells? Unfortunately, there's no interactive chatting here, so I presume I go forward, and I'm very sure it reminds you of those three very important things, which are on the left side of the screen here. If I can show you this, we speak of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. These three things actually triggered the growth for all the sectors. And it's a long, big story by itself. We are going to concentrate on why English came into prominence, why humanities careers came into prominence. That's the point of concern for us all. So let's go back there. First of all, we all got these careers only because of the knowledge of English. Why? Because what happened is with LPG, when so many sectors opened up, when the entire world was looking at India as a huge market, they entered our doors, windows, they entered from everywhere. They made an entry, and what they said is, yes, we want to come to this country and start selling our goods, services, everything. And they also wanted to set up call centers. They wanted to set up IT centers. They wanted to explore Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune as very big, models of Silicon City, mini models of Silicon City. And they started setting up centers here. Of course, policy support was there, but the most important thing was English. The knowledge of English was there. And another thing that really helped us in this entire journey was the ease of data transfer. We were sitting in the early 90s. In the early 90s, we were sitting on the cusp of a revolution, and which actually was the future, and which is the internet revolution. So all these together, socio-economic, political, cultural factors, the change in technology, the incoming markets, and all these things actually led to a lot of media activity, because media again created consumerism. Money started spinning in Indian markets, spending suddenly started growing, earning also was rising. So what happened is the focus shifted from just technological careers to careers in creative fields and management. And how? Now, when with software industry setting a base in India, they started needing a lot of people who know writing for websites, products, manuals, medical transcriptionists. They started needing people who know technical writing. Essentially, they started needing people who know English at all. Plus, we have company bases here in India. The market is the entire world. So we want people who can speak the global language. Remember, English is still the business language of the world. English is the world's largest spoken language of all the registered, whatever number of countries, 167 or so on the UN list and 250 plus by US standards. That's immaterial. But what matters most is English is the largest spoken language in the world. Number two, any choices, any guesses? It is Mandarin, and I don't quite understand this neighbor that we have, and I don't want to make up a note on that. But unfortunately, they always are ahead of us, and I'm extremely jealous of this neighbor, this padosi. We have two very unwanted padosis currently. Third is, of course, it is Hindi, and German, Spanish, all those follow suit. The most important point is, yes, English is in demand. English decides whether we're going to have an entry into a fantastic corporate company, or we're going to grow, or are we going to have a global career. English is a lot important. And I'm not saying that, there's a lot of data to prove. And as a trainer, and as people who are into this domain, this business, we come across these problems day in and day on. Everyone needs English. Well, so as I said, by the turn of the millennium, and by 2010, and by even till date, English remains the most favored skill. The most favored skill, I want to say again, is I want to thrust. So now look at careers afresh. Let us build a healthy perspective towards how strong we are, because we are all from this background. And this language has gained renewed importance in today's era. And non-technical careers are here to boom. So what happens in India in the current print industry? What is the status? In 2020, if now these surveys, and the earlier one also that I showed is all from online sources. The earlier one about media industry was from a government source, and this is also by Statistia. All these companies like Ernst & Young, FITI, all these people, the Statistia, they're all constantly doing these surveys and publishing it online. It's there on public domain. I'm not saying that, I'm just using the figures available in public domain, but the figures are extremely healthy, and they are extremely positive also. They say that if Corona was not there, what would have happened is the print industry by 2022 would have reached to levels of 374.6 billion INR. Well, that's a huge amount. I don't know how much that is, because I can't count beyond 100 rupees. But the point is, yes, it's a whopping amount, and 374.6 billion Indian rupees is big. That is the net worth of the industry. Look at that. So which means so many people can offer jobs, so many people can make money out of it, so many people can participate in this industry. 1 lakh publications, as I said. Let us look at some the snapshots. Then we are the 6th largest publisher of books, 6th or 7th. This figure is shifting again here. Apna Padosi is, I don't want to take the name. It's the sugar wala chini Padosi. They sort of, they beat us at that. They have more number of people who read newspapers and books. Our young readers are growing. Well, and vernacular press is growing like anything. Vernacular, when I say beyond cities like A and B, we have a lot of vernacular readership, and books also, a lot of vernacular, that is regional printing activities happening, and book lovers are on the rise. Why? Because we all know this term, content is king. Everyone wants fantastic content. It sells like anything. It's the way in which you tell stories differently. You don't tell different stories, you just tell stories in a different style, or in short formats and in engaging formats, and it needs a lot of creativity. So all in all, content is king, and internet also has helped us a lot. Who owns the internet? No one knows. But who owns websites? How many websites come up every day? Any count? Any ballpark figures for that? No, nothing, because it's beyond guesstimate. We can't imagine how many websites come up every day, which means those many people are needed for writing the websites. Not technically, non-technically. We need content generators for those websites, don't we? So we need people who are going to get jobs on writing those websites. And then the number of internet users in India is going to grow till 2023 again. We need to write film scripts, blogs, ad copies and content, books, of course, website content, technical writing, online journalism, medical, technical, law. We need a lot of promotional material. Now just imagine who's going to do all this. It's the writers. The writers are going to do all this. And with in which languages? In whichever, but English also, a lot of them. So multiple career choices for writers, and in English and other languages. So the world is all yours. We can just go and just grab our own opportunity. We don't need any background for this other than the ability to tell an engaging story. No one sees degrees. No one sees certifications. No one sees any of that. Anyone can become a storyteller. with the power of language as a tool. How did this English come to India in the first place at all? What happened? Who was he? Well, all of us here are very learned people, and I think I'm the only one who's not from non-literature background, because I'm not a literature person. I'm a journalist, I'm a media person, I'm a writer. But let's go back to the history of the introduction of English in India. With this, a lot of credit, or the entire credit goes to this very great scholar called as Raja Ram Mohan Roy. He was also recently in news for very controversial reasons as to why did he back English education when India needed Vedic and things like that. But let's not get into those debates. Let's simply try and understand what Raja Ram Mohan Roy did. And he was joined by someone, Mr. David Hare, a watchmaker. Now, this Mr. David Hare, this gentleman from Calcutta, as we all remember, Calcutta was then Viceroy's, the governor's office was there. When East India Company became the rulers, they had their base in Calcutta and things like that. So now a lot of people, reformers and even British men from Calcutta were very active. So this Mr. David Hare was himself an illiterate person, and he joined hands with Raja Ram Mohan Roy to press the fact that we all need new education in India. And if that were to happen, we needed English. So Raja Ram Mohan Roy, it is said that toiled over this for a long time. He wrote a letter to Lord Amherst, the then Governor General. It was under consideration for a long time. In fact, it had begun with, I think, even Lord Bentinck. And honestly, I'm not very greatly aware of this history in detail, but what happened as a result of all this effort was, the fact that the East India Company had set aside 1 lakh rupees as some kind of a subsidy to be spent on education in India. And there were Orientalists who said, we should give it to Maulvis and Pandits, and we should spend it on Arabic and Hindu scripture learning. And Raja Ram Mohan Roy said he believed in the fact that no, we should go with English education. And that's how English education was introduced. Well, while reading on this history, one thing really irks me, it makes me feel very bad, is the mention, because this is mentioned in British records. They said that dumb Indians, it is recorded, I'm just quoting it, quote, dumb Indians who knew nothing needed English educations, or some such line, unquote. Now that was how we were looked at, which means if we didn't know English, we were dumb. I don't know that, but yeah, it's a fact that there was a lot of illiteracy, a lot of ignorance, a lot of blind faith and superstitions in our society. So maybe they thought English education would be a better option over all these things to help the society grow. So, let's go forward. And this great scholar, reformist, is credited with the introduction of English in India. It continued. Let's come back to what happened. Finally, the education was done in English, and it started having a lot of impact. We had a large readership in urban centers for English, even pre-independence times in the 19th century also. By the turn of the last millennium, that is around 1890 and 1895 and those times, there was a lot of impact of British and American authors on India. Well, that slowly started leaving its impact. And finally, towards the end, when we reach the tapering end, and which brings us here to this era, that impact is gone now. That impact is gone, because what was the journey is called as the Pagoda Tree School of Thought in literature. Now, I have done a bit of research on this with the help of some scholars who are involved in this, and I'm going to introduce those scholars also. So the pagoda, the base of a pagoda is wide. It is a towering structure. As it moves up, it is free flowing. There's a lot of free flow of air. There's no restriction. It's unbound. So this pagoda tree school of thought was thanks to Dr. Rajendra Ponde. Now he is a scholar. I connected with him. He is a scholar and author. He is a vice principal, Willingdon College, Sangli. He's done his postdoctoral research in English literature. And he is also a proponent of this Pagoda School of Theory. And there are two other scholars called Dr. M.K. Naik, and all these people have written books. Even Dr. M.K. Naik's books are famous in English literature. Maybe you people, many of us here must have read and referred to them. A senior academician, researcher, postdoc researcher, Dr. Srinivas Iyengar, very big names in literature. All these people are proponents of the Pagoda School of Thought. They have given it a wonderful meaning, and what they try to say is there is no particular school of thought as we move into the modern to postmodern eras, which is a very valid point. So Dr. Ponde actually helped me a lot to develop a perspective as I was preparing for this, and I really thank him for his valid inputs here. And as we move forward, let's try and understand as to how the pagoda tree, how we reach the top. And pardon me if all of us are aware of this here, but as I said, I just wanted to touch base on history, because if we don't join the dots, then it doesn't make sense. A little about Dr. Ponde. Now he's himself a researcher, writer. He's gone abroad. He's constantly doing something. He's an author, and he's a very knowledgeable person in English literature, and works for the very famous Willingdon College in Sangli. So when people like him come up with some findings, it adds a lot of value to the academic base, and I really respect that. And it helps us to in going forward. It gets recorded as history. So all these proponents of Pagoda School, they try and explain it in a very simple manner. As I said, towards the turn of the last millennium, from 1850 till 1900 AD, there was a very strong impact of Romanticism on writers in English in India. And even readership. There was a strong influence of Romanticism on readership in India. Well, as I understand, there were not many homegrown writers per se, authors in that period. But after the turn of the century, after the not the millennium, I'm extremely sorry. Somehow the word millennium is on our tongues. After the turn of the century, around 1900 and the period thereafter till the Gandhian era, Gandhiji by himself was a fantastic multitasking person. But these people who were scholars, who laid the foundation for the free India, Dr. Ambedkar, our own Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Sarojini Naidu ji, all these people, they went abroad. There was no choice. They went to British universities. They were educated. They became highly literate. They became qualified, went ahead to write the Constitution for India, one of them. But then what happened is, in this entire pursuit, British thought and British literature had a huge impact on them. So now this was how British literature was flowering in India. So this period is called as the flowering period. Well, after that, after 1918, when Gandhiji, his struggles as a journalist, as a writer, it came to shape. What happened is this school of thought could be called as the Gandhian worldview. He gave it a new thought. He brought in things like nationalism, the awareness about nationalism. What kind of a country were we? What was our political status? Very sorry to say, we were under imperialistic rule. So in other words, gulami mein the hum to. Hamare paas kya political status tha? But Gandhiji, through his articles and through his literature, via his newspapers, he threw a lot of light on this. So he brought in a lot of awareness. Then there was no nationalism. Nationalism, as in there was a lot of regionalism. I am Gujarati, you are Mawadi. And so Gandhiji brought us all together with the power of his pen. And there were people, and so Gandhiji gave us three important values through his work, through his literature, which is nationalism, political awareness, and he gave us a sense of being, no hierarchy, no caste. So he proposed that we are all one, we are all children of God. So people like the famous Indian trio in literature, they started following him. They, Professor C. Raj Rao and R.K. Narayan and Mulk Rajanand. Those people, they were called as the famous trio. They followed Gandhiji. They started following and they were proponents of his theory. So that period was before independence, and they carried forward the Gandhian worldview. Well, and of course, then came the freedom struggle. The freedom struggle is an interesting case in a lot of ways. After freedom struggle also, there was emergency, and there was a lot of things. A lot of things happened in journalism and in the field of literature. One thing that certainly happened during this period, a little before, after independence, and after independence, was the rise of the Indian diaspora. Now, the Indian diaspora, all of us here are literature people, so we all know, I don't have to take names or speak about the Indian diaspora, but the rise of the Indian diaspora by itself is a great history in Indian literature. All these people who were living out, the case was something like, मेरा जूता है जापानी, ये पतलून इंग्लिस्तानी, सर पे लाल टोपी रूसी, फिर भी दिल है हिंदुस्तानी. So they were all living outside, but they wanted to tell stories which connect with Indians. Not all of them had India-centric stories though, but still they wanted to connect soul and heart to Indian readers. So that was a fantastic gift to Indian literature, I must say. All of them, so many of them have actually contributed a lot. Then, of course, this era, let's come back to the modern era where people like Arundhati Roy. What happened is, after mid-80s and 90s, roughly, can we say, is the modern era where slowly now we can see the pagoda taking its shape, because any school of thought doesn't have any hold over the form of writing, over the thought. We can find readers, writers exploring all genres. They are exploring all formats. They want to say a lot. They want to express. So now we are free from the base of the pagoda. We are moving up. In this process also, again, even via the diaspora activity and even in modern literature, we see a lot of East meets West kind of thing. Until then, I remember generations used to read only foreign literature, because on bookshelves, in libraries and in bookstores, we hardly found very few writers in the Indian writers section. All of those who belong to my generation will remember this very vividly. When we walked into any, I've always been in capital cities, Hyderabad, Bangalore, we would find a small thin section by Indian writers. But now, in modern era, they grew like anything. And people like Arundhati Roy, Sudha Murthy, all these people are a gift from this era to us. For that matter, this reminds me of a wonderful meeting with Shri Khushwant Singh ji. When we were all students of journalism, we had gone to his house in Delhi, and we were so lucky, so fortunate. We met him. We had a cup of tea with him, and we were so engrossed in listening to his, what a scholar that was. Well, now let's come back to postmodern and what it is, what it holds for us. So what is postmodern writing is current day writing. There's no specific school of thought. LPG has left its impact. Urbanization has left its impact. There's a lot of impact of the American culture. There's a lot of consumerism. New day ideas are coming up every day. All new formats, new language usage. Allegory and criticism, these kinds of schools of thought still persist, but motivational content has grown a lot. Religious, spiritual, mythology is there in demand still. Regional stories and content is in plenty. So, for example, let me again take the case of Say Arvind Adiga, if you remember, had written a very famous novel, The White Tiger, from Banaras region. Now, Arundhati Roy, God of Small Things, is about, the setup is Kerala. So a lot of regional content also these people brought into mainstream. Regional stories, urban issues, and urban milieu-based stories are written in postmodern era. Well, literature has moved its forms. It is also available on net-based platforms. The second most important thing is anyone can become an author, anyone, and I'm going to give you examples. The content is extremely hyper local. I can tell my own story and become an author. It is as local as that. I don't need to have fancy ideas. The only idea is to be an engaging writer and make engaging stories. India by itself is a rising case in literacy. With every 10 years, when we see with every new census, we find that more and more people are getting literate in India. Now that's a great news. Earlier, being literate meant only giving thumbs or only just writing one name as a signature. Now that is not the definition of being a literate in India. Being a literate means any child who till 15 years of age who has attended school at least till 9th standard knows a lot, any language, can read and write a lot more than just signing names, is a literate person. So some considerations are there, and the government on its part is ensuring that there are no school dropouts, which means the number of people who are getting literate in India is going up. At least on papers it is, so it's a good news. And plus, all of us, in fact, some people rue this fact, and I'm with them, that regional education, vernacular education is now marginal. Thrust on English education has ensured that the coming few generations, after 10 years from now, this problem of people don't know English will not be there, because most generations will be educated in English. So that has also added to the pool of readers. Every 5-10 years, the pool of readers is growing. So please remember that print is here to stay. Publishing in any format is here to stay. There are going to be careers galore for many, many years to come. How can I say that anyone can become a writer? Now, there are many writers, but I want to take the case of three very people very close to my heart as a reader and as a case in, because I belong to this industry, I have seen these people grow. Now, this is the name of a very prolific writer called as Sheila Kumar. She's there on the screen. Sheila Kumar and I, we joined the Times of India way back on the same day. And this lady has always been very prolific. She used to be in the midst of shifts. She had a very good habit. She used to keep writing all the time. She never gave up her writing effort at all. She used to publish. She is an army wife. Her husband is a retired army officer. Now, she's an extremely gifted and a very hardworking writer. Now, writing is a very painful activity, as all of us know. We need a lot of patience to create stories. It's a very painful process. It tires us out. But then it's a very enjoyable process once it's done. So Sheila was always doing this, and she was a very prolific writer. She published her first book called Kith and Kin. That was just 10 years ago, but she keeps writing every day, book reviews, news stories, articles, everything. Her language, her book, Startup Affair, is her latest book, and it makes for a great read. Why? Because as the name suggests, it's about a startup and how the protagonist girl is a startup and falls in love with a cabbie, and it's a Bangalore-based story. So it's very interesting. We must read that. Her language is extremely updated. Now, this is a very important quality about postmodern writers. They do not stick to old formats in writing. They take their own liberty when it comes to expression. Sheila is one such case. Now, even as a case study, when I finish this paper, I'm going to do it, convert it to a case study. And I have on the screen, I have tried to show something which she published only 2 days ago in the Indian Express, Bangalore. And she says she's coined a new term called as cancel culture. So if I'll make this piece available for you, I'll make her Facebook page available. We can go explore and find her books. All of us who want to be very good writers must read Sheila Kumar. Why? Because her lexical range. Now, lexical range is what is the vocabulary. When students come to us, we have trained a lot of people, and when students come to us, they say, "Ma'am, how do I increase my vocab?" No one can help you to increase your vocabulary. Your lexical range is totally out of your reading. Why? Because experience and expression are deeply connected. When you experience something deeply, only then we can express, correct? So Sheila Kumar's lexical range is vast, very engaging narration. We don't want to leave this book when we start reading our startup affair. Her language ranges from complex usages. That is there. You need to go back and find out the meaning and what is she trying to say. So language usages are complex, yet they're very modern. They're very current day usages. And she has the ability to play with verbs and nouns. As I said, she coins new verbs, and writers nowadays are taking a lot of liberties with this verb and noun forms. So many nouns have become verbs by themselves. So, there's a lot can be spoken about that. Let me take my second case, why I like to cite this boy. I have observed him very closely. He's just a 21-year-old boy, my student from Indira Group of Institutes. Now, this boy was so driven that he wanted to be an author. Now, this boy his name is Akash Dhanurkar. He is a media student, and he used to tell me, he worked with me on a newspaper, and he used to tell me, "Ma'am, will you edit a book that I want to write?" And I took him very lightly. I said, let's see, because I'm in this profession of editing and writing. So he said, "Ma'am, please to me edit Karalka." He asked me, and I took him lightly. And somehow he thought that ma'am is not interested. Now, that is not the point. The point is, this boy actually came up with a book, and he got it published, and he got it sold on Amazon. And within the first year, his second book is now out, and it is in top 10 on ebook list on Amazon within 1 year. And this book was all about his sister's story. This boy, he wrote about his sister who expired, who died of a very rare disease, and she was also battling depression. So this boy wanted to make a point and tell her story. Just imagine, I have just taken one printout, one photo of his excerpt from an interview with Indian Express, but this boy became the news himself. Now, what was his English level? Barely. I mean, just working knowledge of English. So what he did, he partnered with his friend who knew better English, and both of them together got it published. And this boy is now a celebrity. He calls himself an author. Just imagine. That's why I said, anyone who has a story to tell, his formula is the power of telling stories about self and in shorter formats. So his language is extremely simple. He uses very simple. His excerpts are there, but I don't have the time to read them. My next and third author is a very celebrated author. Her 12 books, she have earned her a rare distinction of being in the top 80 or top even lesser authors in the country. And it is also said that she got nominated, it was in the consideration list for Booker nomination. Just imagine. Now this lady and I, we go back together. We were writing together for Times of India only in 2008 and 9. And she had lost her father, and she was running a blog. And she was a blogger, but very, very smart, extremely hardworking, very dedicated. And one more thing about her is her language is extremely simple. So she told me one day, "Suruda, I want you to write my first book review." I remember her words very clearly in my ears. She used to tell me, "Suruda, you are a very good writer. I want you to write my first review." And I wrote her first book review in Times of India. That was her first ever book review. But I'm so proud to say that she's moved on so much. Look at the number of likes, 2 lakh plus likes on her page. She's a celebrity. She's a celebrity. She goes around, she's places, she's a motivational speaker. This is a very big success story in front of my eyes. It gives me a big message that anyone can be a writer. if the drive has to be there, the platforms are there, the possibilities are there, all of us will have our own readership, but the will and the determination have to be there. So we all people from literature background, and why I say literature background is when we are into classrooms, and I have personally noticed that people who are from literature background have a strong base in language. And that's a very big plus point, which others don't have. So we just have to keep tuning ourselves, fine tuning ourselves. Well, to prove all these facts done, and so that I don't leave any loose ends when I'm speaking to very, very experienced and very honorable people like all of us here, I decided to go in for a quick survey on readership, because it adds a lot of academic meaning to any study, any pursuit. So quickly, a survey was carried out, and this form will be shared with all of us also here, because Rupa ma'am said, ma'am, let us share this with everyone here. And till date, whatever 140, in 24 hours, I got 140 people who responded to this. It had about 11 questions, 10 closed-ended and 1 open-ended question. So I just floated this request on Google via all the net platforms and via Google Forms. And I told them that I'm a writer and a trainer, and I request you to please help me with filling this, because this is going to help university level teachers in English. And the findings will definitely help us in some way. So what are those findings and what happened? Well, who were the respondents for this survey? There were people, I'm very happy to tell you that all these people are from 18 years upwards till 60 plus, from students, homemakers, also even academicians. There's a vice chancellor here in this survey, very senior scientists, writers, engineers, people from software background, people from all backgrounds and across cities. So my respondents in 24 hours, I'm very lucky. I got people from Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Mumbai, Australia, US, Bijapur, Belgaum, retired bankers, retired members of judiciary, everyone participated in this survey, and they were so eager to fill the form. Extremely happy. Some of them are writers, some of them are very good writers. So this is going to help us a lot. What did the survey say and what are the findings about readership habits? So the first question was, what's your age? And I found out that between 18 to 25, 17.5% people of 140, from 140, this was random sampling because I couldn't choose my sample like that. It was random sampling. The only consideration was they are from urban areas, because people generally, we are connected by our phones on urban areas. So about 17.5% of my respondents were from this age group. That really impressed me, because my daughter immediately circulated in her friends, and all these girls and boys, they immediately, and like that, so many people from that age group also. It tells us a story. It tells us that they also read. Well, 40 to 60 is the maximum age group that responded, which means these people are maximum into reading activity in this sample. Well, and then I wanted to find out, take a peek at, are people really reading English, or they are just sticking to vernacular? No, but my study told me that 55.8% of people read English literature, English books and magazines. Now that's quite a number. Regional Hindi are 24.6%. That's also quite a number. And some people say no books at all, only newspapers. Well, and some people, a very tiny number says we read only social media posts. So there's a lot of hope for us. There's a lot of positive message here that people do read English literature. As a reader, what form of expression do you prefer? That was the next question. And people liked, maximum people, 44.9% people said they liked prose. Well, 30% people said anything. And the next question was, what's your best choice for content of the chosen literature? Well, with the turn of the millennium, we have seen a lot of choice going back again to spiritual and religious content, also for motivational books. But yet, fiction and romantic literature remains a big hit. 23.2% people say they like romantic and fiction, and 44% said no, anything that comes our way. So if we want to become a writer, or if we want our students to become writers, we can ask them to engage into any format. That's okay, but they should know that format. I mean, they should know that content very well. Medium, now medium is how, on what platform do you want to read? And friends, this is an extremely good news. For me, it felt like some good music to my ears when I read that about 60%, which is 59.4% people, still want to read print in India. Now there's a small deviation here. I want to mention one reader or two readers from Australia who said that they want to read online. Now, who are these two readers? One is my own sister-in-law, who's an extremely intelligent English literature scholar herself. She's a content developer. She's an academician. And yet in their countries, they prefer online formats. Why? Because they're more convenient like that. It's the convenience, user friendliness. They just load their stories on Kindle and or some those iPads and all that, and they start reading. But in India, people still prefer a print copy, which is a great news. Critical literature. So now here the lesson for us is that we need to move from critical literature. We don't have to stick to the same old format of taking John Keats and Thomas Hardy and start criticizing them and sharing it with people, because people don't want it. They don't read critical literature. They say that sometimes, some people say we never read it. So only 70% people said sometimes we read it. So we need to move away only, from critical formats. What is the periodicity? How often? So they say, happily enough, 57% people said that they're constantly reading something. Do they buy books or they borrow from friends? Now, the biggest thing is revelation was again the younger generation, including my own daughter who's 20, 21. She said they have no qualms about saying, no, I just borrow it from friends and read. But that generation, it means that they don't want to spend. That's not their priority. But some people, 32% of people said, yes, they always buy books. So what do they think about the writing talent in India? About English writers, people think that they are extremely talented. And how much is the money they want to spend? So this pricing strategy is an extremely important game in the publishing industry. Of late, we can notice that people who have become very famous is also because of the pricing strategy. The books are kept extremely low, or they are available on all platforms at the same time. So they are available on e-books, they are available as print books, they are available on YouTube as a video also. So video books are there, which means that people want to spend lesser and lesser. So, but maximum number of people say that they can spend about 200 to 500 on a book. So when we publish a book, the pricing should be less, it shouldn't be more. And a few names cropped up in this study because I was extremely curious as to who are the writers that you read and what kind of reading that you do. So this was an open-ended question, and some names that came up again and again, and some I haven't yet added, but Amitav Ghosh, Arthur Haley, Amish Tripathi, Sudha Murthy was a chosen name. Devdutt Patnaik, people said they read Devdutt Patnaik a lot. Some people said that I have finished all of his books. P.G. Woodhouse, of course, Rhonda Byrne. I had not put, as I said, this was just random sampling, so there was no specific clause on only Indian writers. I just said, write what kind of reading you do. So many people wrote about Marathi writers. They said a lot about Pula Deshpande, so Jane Austen, and it was quite a revelation for me, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing this survey. So I'm sorry if that went too fast, but we need to be conscious of time, and extremely sorry if that pacing was comfortable or not. So finally, Ramayan to ho gaya, abhi Sita kaun hai is the big question, and I hope Sita kaun hai ye samajh mein aa gaya hai. And this lady on the screen is not Sita, but she is one like us. She teaches, she trains. And what is it that we have to take back to the classroom? The first thing is that we need to understand that there is immense creative potential. Remember, I said Akash Dhanurkar, my student, I never imagined that he's going to be an author. When people say that, ma'am, I want to write, yes, we need to identify that. When anyone from around us, even the inner voice that from inside us tells you that, yes, I want to tell my story, I want to say something, please give it a thought. Do not let it die within, because it's possible. Promote the writing habit among students and among colleagues and among yourselves also, with yourself also. But do not allow texties. Texties is SMS text. Do not allow that. It's not allowed. And so try to understand differences between what kind of language is getting used. Is it American English? Is it British English? So let's pay attention to that. And when they read my intro, they said that I'm associated with British Council. I'm sorry, I'm not associated with the British Council, but I'm a master trainer from the British Council, and which taught a lot of things about how to train people in English. And well, the most important takeaway is listening, speaking, reading, and writing, LSRW. Friends, that reminds me as to all of us who are in the younger ages should do all these certifications from British Council and Cambridge. And there are many countries also where we can go, not in the Corona period, but we should do all these international and national level certifications in training, TESOL and those kinds of things, because it helps us in the growth as a teacher in language. We can explore more opportunities. So yes, definitely, we should come out of the mindset that I'm done with education. No, education is constantly, we need to upgrade ourselves. So LSRW is a fantastic model. We must give assignments based on listening, speaking, reading, writing all the time, because now you don't need a language lab. We can make them tune into their own YouTube and listen to English. Tell them, don't listen to Australian English or American English, because American English is extremely complicated. Also, do not ask them to tune into Indian English. Do not ask them, because Indian English again is fully verbose. Let them first tune into British English. Work on their accent, not so much on every single pronunciation, but yes, we need to neutralize that accent. Why? Because once they go to the industry outside, your accent also gets counted. Well, most of us, all of us, including myself, I have a heavy Marathi accent. But it doesn't really matter now, because I don't want to make a job out of this. So long as people can listen to me, I'm done. However, in today's time and era, we need to neutralize our accent. So we need to work on that. We need to work on all the LSRW grammar skills, very important. We need to pay attention to grammar. This is one area where I feel very sad inside. There is absolutely no awareness about when do I use the, when do I use, even the verb tense structure. Major mistakes are done by students. We need to guide them, especially people from rural areas. I had a student who was, he said he's done BA in English literature. He said, I have done BA in English literature. And he came from a vernacular background. And I was extremely happy. And he knew a lot about English literature, but he didn't know the language itself. I said, and how did you write? If you don't know English? He said, no, ma'am, in my hometown, they allow us to write in Marathi. So he wrote all his critical essays in Marathi. So that was something like reminded me of when I learned Sanskrit way back in my intermediate in Hyderabad. We wrote Sanskrit descriptions in English. Now, it only gave us a peek into Sanskrit literature per se. Bhartruhari Niti Shataka Subhashitani. I know that, but I don't know Sanskrit speaking. So it's something like that. However, all of us need to create an environment where they learn more English. Now, let's not get into what is English our language or it's not, and those political divides. No, whoever gets into a political divide, tell them keep it to yourself, because English is constitutionally the official language, the second official language of India. Even Indian Parliament proceedings take place in English. Everything is in English. Everything is in written format. Everything you should know. Lawyers should know English. Doctors should know English. Software people should know English. Everyone should know English. So English has a lot of scope. And luckily, all of us sitting here are into these careers. Make money out of it. Make money out of it by writing, by editing, by freelancing. Go online. Do not stick to literary classrooms thinking literature is a base. Remember in Pagoda School of Thought, now we are into free times. We have to explore these opportunities. allot abundant practicum to students, ensure that they do it, give them on the spot assignments, ask them to write skits, ask them to write plays, ask them to write literary essays. If nothing, ask them to write reviews. Which hotel did you go to last week? Write a review, present it right now, and supervise that. So a lot of practicum. Make teaching a hand-holding affair. Now, this is again an unfortunate thing as to why only some of us become very good trainers. No, it's not the certifications that makes us great trainers. It's the hand-holding model that ensures that we rise above teaching. Teaching is linear, friends. Teaching is a linear process, but training is a two-way process. In training, we hold hands with students. It's a partnership, and we ensure that we are with them till they achieve their goals. Because finally, it is my aim as a trainer to see to it that I get result. I help them get result. It counts. For me also, it counts. Finally, it is the student feedback, which is, commercially speaking, it is the student feedback. However, on satisfaction levels, it is, and on spiritual levels, it is my own goal also to help people grow in life. So make teaching a hand-holding affair. And on our own part, be ready to change and update our own language skills and expression. There's no two ways about it. We need to keep reading and, as I said, add more certifications, learn more. Only PhD is not going to help us. Of course, PhD and academic research is a vast activity by itself, an extremely reward activity. However, we need to develop skills and move beyond theory and develop skills. I think मेरा सारा प्रवचन हो गया है, and I'm extremely thankful. If you're still there, I can't see anyone, but if you're still listening and if you're tuned in and if you're not, burnt out, I'm extremely thankful. And for this opportunity, this means a lot to me. Rupa ma'am, thank you so much. The entire team, thank you, my wonderful participants. Arise, awake, and stop not till you achieve your goals. And so said Swami Vivekananda ji. Welcome to New Age Careers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, sir.
It was a great session indeed, and I hope all the participants have learned a lot. Ma'am, I would request Rupa ma'am to kindly continue with the question answer session.
Do we have the time for that?
Yes, we have got still 15 minutes to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suruda, for a wonderful session. There are a few questions. As you mentioned the importance of English language, I would like to ask you a question.
Please
how
tell me.
English how English will help to survive the laborers or the employees who are losing their jobs in this pandemic? It is asked by Dipti Pethe.
Oh, okay. How English will help them to survive is a wonderful opportunity here by itself. I'll just remind you of one thing, Dipti ji. People are moving online. So most businesses are moving from offline to online. And I know people who have immediately turned to social media platforms. So everyone now here wants to tell a story. For example, if someone in the nearby vicinity wants to go online with her boutique, because now she can't run a shop. So what he or she will do is she'll hire services of someone who's a social media specialist. But mostly all these people are technically sound. But if someone like us who knows a bit of English can help them tell their story for Instagram, for Facebook, for web content development, and we can do a lot of freelancing jobs like this. So immediately, if you ask me, this is one opportunity which all of us knowing a bit of English can tap. Am I? Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Suruda, there's a request. Can you please stop your sharing screen?
I just want to add here one more thing. All soft. Okay. Yeah, Rupa, tell me.
No, I just want you to stop sharing of your screen.
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to add something?
Yes. Tell me.
Okay, there's one more question.
Yeah, I said,
No, you go ahead.
yeah, please tell me. Because people who have suddenly gone virtual now, see what has happened is the entire world has moved from offline to online. 70% of IT companies, most IT companies have moved their 70% of staff to online. And honestly speaking, all these IT professionals, they need training in English. They need training in English. So most of us who are trainers in English can tap our own local areas, our own this thing, and start training people around us. That's also a wonderful opportunity, because you don't need anything for that. You just need a Zoom platform and you need a network. You don't have to spend so much money also. So, that's another opportunity where you can tap opportunities in training people.
Can you hear me, Suruda?
Yeah. Yes, Rupa, tell me.
Yeah. The second question is by Ms. Ambika Kamath. How do you look at the immense appeal of local content on platforms such as Netflix, sometimes mean for the majority, perhaps urban audience? How do you look at the issue of representation and misrepresentation of areas such as Goa and Northeast in the mainstream media? What are the solutions to the same?
So we're talking of representing areas which are remote, say for Northeast and Goa, areas like that. And we need to represent them on platforms like Netflix. Is that what you mean? In what format? For example, do we want to promote them via stories and all that? So what is the question? I didn't really understand.
Okay, I would like to repeat the question. How do you look at the immense appeal of local content on platforms such as Netflix, sometimes meant for the majority, perhaps urban audience? How do you look at the issue of representation and misrepresentation of areas such as Goa and Northeast in the mainstream India? What are the solutions to the same?
Yeah. Now this is a very sensitive, region-sensitive question. Yeah, it's very unfair actually if they are getting misrepresented. So, for example, even in the movie Pink, when this girl is from North India, and people look at her, discrimination. Yes. So that's of course unfair. And the solutions are, unfortunately, these are all linear mediums. We cannot control what happens on Netflix. We don't have a control over that. As an audience, what happened when people said stop buying Chinese goods? All that rests in our hand is to not watch such content. Simple. We cannot see TV, Netflix, all these are linear media. You either watch it or you stop it, or you shift your channel. So as an aware audience, we must, and as members of the literature academia, we should spread awareness via our social media blogs towards these issues. That is one power, because that is something that we can do.
Okay, there's a last question by Dr. Sachin Kamble. Being a writer, what do you think about youth literature? The literature written by youth is youth literature, or the literature which focus the youth is the youth literature?
It's wonderful. Both is youth literature. Both is youth literature. And the voice of the youth is extremely strong now, because they're all over social media. As I said, they know they know the platform, and they just a little bit of storytelling and they start telling stories. So for example, I'll just tell you, Amazon now is one platform where you can go and publish your ebook. You don't have to worry about printing a book or publishing a print copy. So anyone can go online and do that. So the voice of the youth of this country has become very strong, in terms of readership, also in terms of writing expression also.
Thank you, Surudha.
Thank you.
It was really a wonderful session, and you have given answer to even very sensible questions. I hope everyone liked the session, and if you could see the chat box, you can find that yes, they all have appreciated your session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'll just scroll through the chat box and leave. Okay. Thanks everyone, and you can connect with me anytime for any guidance. I'm there. All of it. Thank you so much. But Rupa, we have to share the survey form with them. Yeah. Thank you.
We will be doing that. We will be doing that.
Yes.
Please stay for 5 minutes, because there is a vote of thanks session.
Sure.
I request Dr. Professor Abra to go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Sirla ma'am. It was really a very fascinating session.
Thanks a
And
lot.
thank you, Rupa ma'am. Now I would request Dr. Nipam Kumar Saikia sir to kindly give the official vote of thanks to our first technical speaker of the day.
Thank you so much.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You are
Am I
audible.
audible?
Yes, you are.
So, good afternoon to everyone.
Good
It's indeed a privilege to propose the vote of thanks to a person who has really enlightened us. And practically, I feel that this session has, provoked us to play the role of teacher in a most desired way. And it is indeed mind-blowing. Some of the things that she has highlighted. Number one, that very recently I came across one student who did her PhD on literature, and she's very much frustrated that doing PhD in English literature cannot land us anywhere. But if we know how to utilize our literature background, our literature knowledge, it can open up many avenues. It can, open up many careers. For example, we can be a very good content writer. We can be very good content developer. We can be a very good script writer. We can be a very, very successful writer, provided we know how to utilize the process of writing. And I told all these things to that particular students. And today, Ms. Surhuda Kulkarni madam has highlighted this. I'm really thankful to her. Secondly, she has thrown light on the perspective of the rise of English language and the role played by Raja Ram Mohan Rai that is really, really, appreciable. And the third point is the role of Mahatma Gandhi. I have a very strong obsession with Mahatma Gandhi, who has not only played a role in the freedom struggle, he is also a great writer. He is the greatest nationalist, and Gandhi's contribution to each and every sphere of life is always remembered, and she has highlighted this. And particularly, she talked about some of the very, very recent writers, and how anybody can be writer, how anybody can utilize the kind of platform available in front of us, and that is really appreciable. And the last, the kind of survey, I am highly benefited by the survey. I think all the the other members of my family.
Dr. Nipam, we're not able to hear you. Are you there? Dr. Nipam? Yeah.
Participating teachers, and also, yes, are you listening?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now,
Yes,
now you are audible.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Trying to say that Surhuda Kulkarni.
Your voice is breaking. Your voice is breaking. You're not audible now. Dr. Nipam, are you there?
I'm there, but because of technical issues, the network is getting disconnected. Now?
It's breaking. Your voice is breaking.
Right at the moment, am I audible?
No.
Not yet.
Now?
No.
So what can I do? There's a network issue.
Yeah.
Hello? Hello?
You're not audible. Okay, Nipam, it's okay. I must thank Suruda on behalf of HRDC, UGC, and Pratibha College. It was really a wonderful session, and all we have benefited by your session. If there is any question, any problem, we will forward it to you. And I hope that the people will not be disappointed. And it was really a great session. Thank you very much. It was a different session rather, and that's why people liked it a lot.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Suruda.
Thank you, Rupa ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Yeah.
Best
Thank you,
luck.
ma'am.
Thanks a lot. Can I leave?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am,
but
sure.
Thank you, Abra sir. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you, Rupa ma'am. Thank you, Surada ma'am. Now we'll continue with our second technical session. Today's speaker, Dr. Nandini Sen ma'am, is already online. So I would officially request Mr. Bezborua Ripunjoy to kindly introduce the next speaker. Sir, are you online?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Kindly unmute and open your video, and you can introduce our next speaker, Dr. Nandini Sen. She's already online.
Hello, everyone. I am Ribunja Bezbura, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Bongaigaon College, Assam. Today we have our second session with Professor Nandini C. Sen. She teaches English in Delhi University. She was a fellow at the prestigious Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Simla. She is the proud recipient of Sir Soles Fellowship for Academic Research in London, the Ambassador for Peace Prize for her work towards educating slum dwellers, and the Right India Award for her creative writing. She writes on diaspora studies, African studies, and comparative literature. Some of her academic publications include The Black Woman Speaks, a study of Tora Nopa and Buchi Imeshita, Through the Diasporic Lens, Volumes 1 and 2, Mahasweta Devi, Critical Perspectives. Sen is a keen observer of the society and a social commentator. Her short stories have been featured in literary journals such as The Elusive Genre and The Muse. She has also been featured in the Asian Collective of Short Stories and the Australian India collaboration titled The Glass Walls. Thank you, ma'am. Now I request Professor Nandini C. Sen, ma'am, to deliver her valuable and insightful deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. My compliments to the organizers, Dr. Rupa, UGC. It's indeed an honor to be among such incredibly erudite people and to be able to deliver a lecture in this gathering. So thank you so much, everyone. I'd like to share my screen, if I may, and we will straight away go into the lecture. I was listening to the previous lecture, and all I'll say is that you know, um, a certain kind of take was taken that well, with a PhD in English, what really can you do? Which I don't quite know if I'll agree with that. But anyways, having done a PhD and a postdoc, I would want many more in my line of things. But yes, doing a PhD in literature does not mean that we do not do the other things that one is talking about. And critiquing literature, which we were told which might not have too much of an audience, well, technically, it's not supposed to have too much of an audience. It is for a select set of people who study the literatures in a certain manner. Anyways, so I am always a votary for hardcore knowledge of literature. That the reason I say it is not because I'm a student and a teacher of literature. The reason I say it is what I will also try to show you is because literature is life. It teaches you about life. So if you love life, if you are attuned to life in a certain manner, the study of literature makes you a better human being, is a kind of an argument that I like to make. So kindly allow me to share my screen, and I will straight away go into my lecture.
Ma'am, you are co-host. You can share your screen.
Okay, I'll just do that.
Yeah.
Can all of you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So, okay, so now I will not see you anymore. I'm going to enlarge my screen. So yes, like you see what I've titled my paper. Just give me a second. Yeah. So I call it Literature and Pandemic, Lessons for the Humankind. Now, the reason why I'm doing this, Since many of you heard my introduction, and my areas of work are African studies and diaspora studies, and of course, gender studies. But since one is dealing with the pandemic, and it is such a harsh reality for many of us now for months together, I decided to fall back on something that we all love, and which is again a part of our lives. We are all here today because we are literature students. So I want to take you through a kind of a historical journey of how the pandemic has been dealt with in literature. That is one part of the story. The second part of the story is what I began my lecture with. Why do we study literature? Why are we then engaging with the pandemic? And last but not the least, what does it teach us? So that is why the second part of the lecture is called Lessons for the Humankind. So I begin with a quote by an author with whom I'm sure all of you are familiar with, Albert Camus. And what does Camus say? He says, death by plague or plagued to death is the question that we are going to be asking here. And I quote Camus, who says, nobody is capable of really thinking about anyone, even in the worst calamity. We cannot stir a finger in this world without the risk of bringing death to somebody. Yes, I've been ashamed ever since I've realized that we all have the plague, and I have lost my peace. Camus says in a very, very fascinating novel, which I will request you all to pick up if you have not already. It was written in 1947, a novel called The Plague. What is he talking about? What does this sentence mean? So when there is the pandemic, when the plague is upon us, there are two kinds of things that happen. One, you see some examples of incredible bravery. We've all been seeing it. You know, the people, some doctors, the kind of stellar work that they have done, some, ordinary people who are out on the streets, supplying ration to people, taking care of them, and some incredible stories of brutality where people have been displaced. They have had to walk back for miles together before they can reach their homes. People who have lost their jobs, and the stories of brutality and terror does not seem to be ending. So the plague, like everything else, brings this very sad fact to us that, what Camus is saying. I've been ashamed that we all have the plague. So the plague then is not just that physical manifestation of the disease that we all know and recognize. There is also the plague of the flesh, which lies within, which torments us in a certain manner.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
hello. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Participants want you to be in slide mode so they can see the full screen. Slideshow mode.
Are you not able to see the full screen right now?
Yes, but it is PPT view. They wanted a slideshow view.
I don't know how to do it.
Okay, ma'am. Kindly continue. No issues.
Okay. Is this not convenient? Can you not see it?
No issues, ma'am. You can continue. Not a problem. Yeah.
So this, I don't know, I've not followed all your lectures, but even if I'm at the cost of repeating myself, but we all need to know it. A pandemic, you know where it comes from. So Greek pan means all, and demos, people. So when all the people are grappling with a certain disease is when it is called a pandemic. Epidemic is the infectious disease that has spread across a large region. For example, multiple continents or worldwide, affecting a substantial number of people. So so this is your textbook definition of what a pandemic is. And throughout human history, there have been a number of pandemics of diseases such as the smallpox and the tuberculosis. The most fatal pandemic in recorded history was the Black Death, which is also known as the plague, which killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people in the 14th century. Other notable pandemics include the 1918 pandemic and the Spanish influenza or the Spanish flu, And of course, the current ones that we are dealing with is our good old COVID-19, and we still don't know how to battle COVID-19. We are all still in the process, and HIV/AIDS, which somehow we have been able to stem just a wee bit. But COVID-19, the fight is still on. Okay, so let me take you really far back into a realm that you all are all familiar with. And students of Delhi University study Sophocles in their first semester. So we study the Oedipus Rex. So I thought, let me start with Oedipus Rex. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Oedipus Rex. So Sophocles, if you can remember the beginning of Oedipus Rex, and this is, he's dealing with the first half of the decade, that is the 430 to 420 BC. Mark the dates, 430 to 420 BC. A lethal plague is described in this drama, with which you all are, I would presume, familiar. So in the very first scene of the play, you have Sophocles presenting the basic social and historical axis around which the plot will unfold. And there's a devastating plague that has happened in Thebes. It's presented to the audience through the dialogue between Oedipus and the priest. And I read, the king has already taken some action to deal with this harm by sending his brother-in-law Creon to the oracle of Delphi to ask for a salvation plan. These are lines 68 to 72. And then the oracle announces that the plague is a result of religious pollution, and that the god Apollo requests the people of Thebes exile and previously unknown miasma. It's a Greek origin with a sense of moral noxious pollution. So what is happening here is, again, what Camus was saying much later. So it is a physical as well as a mental, and so something, there's a physical manifestation of a disease, which has also happened because of a manifestation inwards. And if I can quote, for those who might not remember the text very well, so this is how it begins. What means this reek of incense everywhere, and everywhere laments and litanies? And the priest says, a blight is on our harvest in the year, a blight upon the grazing flocks and herds, a blight on wives in travail, and withal, armed with his blazing torch, the god of plague had swooped upon our city, emptying the house of Cadmus, and the murky realm of Pluto is full fed with groans and tears. So it's a terrifying description of people dying. There is death aboard. The reason for the deaths is yet not known, but a scientific study has happened. So it wasn't as if it was just mentioned, as if Sophocles imagined the whole thing. He was actually talking about a real life incident which had happened. And for the first time, we get to know what had happened was a kind of a disease which affects animals. And then, because see what he's talking about when the god of plague has affected the grazing flocks and the herds. So this is the plague of Thebes. This is a historical epidemic, if one may call it. And I urge you to read this. So Sophocles, as I've told you, now the plague is described in this drama, a critical approach to Oedipus Rex in analyzing the literary description of the disease. And what are we seeing here is that the goal is to clarify whether the plague described in Oedipus Rex reflects an actual historic event which was described by Thucydides. Thucydides was a historian, as occurring around the same time that Sophocles wrote, and to propose a likely causative pathogen. A critical reading of Oedipus Rex and a comparison with Thucydides' history, as well as a systematic review of the historical data, strongly suggests that this epidemic was an actual event, probably caused by what is known as the Brucella abortus. So a proper scientific study has happened on the subject, which tells us that Sophocles wasn't just writing out of imagination. There is historicity to the event, and the historicity is a marked historicity, and probably in history, in the history of medicine. So, when we study literature, why literature reflects life. life is made of what all that you encounter. And you would be interested to find out that the findings are recorded in medical historicity. When people started to understand and study the plague, one of the examples that is given, the earliest example that is given, is from Sophocles' text. And then again, I quote a few lines here. Wasted thus by death on death, all our city perishes, corpses spread infection around. Now, does it seem very, very common, very, very contemporary? You know, we have been reading how the corpses are being thrown in pits and such like so that the infection does not spread. Um, Continue to read. The plague that is described in Oedipus Rex could possibly be related to the plague that struck Athens, and all of that. That's the plague of, and it was called the plague of Athens. And then at that point of time, because there was no the medical facilities were not as developed as that point of time, there's a sort of blame game. So the gods are called in, and Ares is blamed. Ares is the god of war. And the god of war is called, and citizens try to propitiate the gods for freeing them from this plague and from this terrifying pestilence. The god of war is sort of blamed and prayed to. Now, the reason why this happens again is because it is felt, one of the things that you must be negotiating with on a very regular basis is that the pandemic is treated as a war. So we have COVID warriors, we have so it's likened to a war. So what happens here is that there is the god of war, and the god of war is being propitiated and being requested that please deliver us from this terrible plague and this terrible pestilence which has befallen all of us. I wanted to show you the picture of the man that we all love reading and the man that we all revere. What I most want you to do is to make a note of the time, because we are going to be progressing in time from here. After this, I will make a very big leap to come to someone you know very well, one of our most favorite playwrights, Shakespeare. And why do I talk about Shakespeare here? Because, these days people learn lesser from their classrooms, but they learn more from their WhatsApp forwards. So there was this WhatsApp forward that went round for a very long time that Shakespeare wrote very important plays during the pandemic. Well, to just bust the myth, Shakespeare did write a lot, but Shakespeare never mentions the pandemic. He never mentioned, he is one person who shies away from mentioning the plague, in spite of the fact that his entire life was lived under the shadow of this terrifying plague, and yet he chooses not to mention it. If you want, I can enlarge the picture for you to see it. This is a horrifying picture of the deaths. So if you can see, so there is the mother, there is there's a child which is feeding on the mother, and all of them are lying dead. And I think very recently we saw an exact same picture of a mother who was forced to walk back those many kilometers to her house. On the way, she collapsed and she died, and her infant was suckling at her breast, completely unaware of the fact that the mother had left her for good. So look at the contemporaneity of the situation. It was happening at that point of time. It is happening even today. So I will, at some point of time, even discuss the social situation and the political situation, and how the pandemics are used by politicians to further their gains. But that is for a little later. Okay. So this is something that I mentioned. So Shakespeare lived his entire life in the shadow of the bubonic plague. How do we learn about Shakespeare? On April 26, 1564, in the parish register of the Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon, it is recorded that the baptism of one Eulymus Filius Johannes Shakespeare happened. Our good old man was born then. A few months later, in the same register, the vicar noted the death of Oliver Gunn, an apprentice weaver, and in the margins next to that entry scribbled the words, "Here begins the plague." So immediately after the birth of Shakespeare, a little while later, you get to know that the plague had hit, and it was a very, very virulent plague which had hit. Okay. So such outbreaks did not rage on forever. Now, the good part, if at all there is something to celebrate. So when the plagues come, after a point of time, the virus weakens and the people develop immunity, and then slowly and steadily the virus disappears, but it comes back all over again in different forms, and each more virulent than the other. But I want you to take cognizance of this. The outbreaks did not rage on forever. With the help of strict quarantines and a change in the weather, the epidemic would slowly wane, as it did in Stratford, and life would resume to its normal course. But after an interval of a few years, in cities and towns throughout the realm, the plague would return. It generally appeared on the scene with little or no warning, and it was terrifyingly contagious. Victims would awaken with fever and chills. A feeling of extreme weakness or exhaustion would give way to diarrhea, vomiting, bleeding from the mouth, nose, or rectum, and the telltale buboes or swollen lymph nodes in the groin or armpit. Death, often in this great agony, would almost inevitably follow. Does it seem like we are talking 16th century, or does it seem like we are talking about 2020? To me, when I was researching this, I was so often completely taken aback by what I was reading. It was like it was happening today. And which is why I'm constantly asking you to sort of take cognizance of the historicity and how our writers have been constantly cautioning us. They have been telling us. It's a different story. The historians tell us, the historians report, the literatures tell us and caution us, but we forget very fast. And because we forget very fast, things happen to us, and the things that happen to us aren't particularly good. Okay. And then we also find out about the rate of infection. It was much higher in the densely populated cities than in the country. So this is something that you will again see. This is happening in the 21st century. A lot of people feel that if they send their families away to the villages, they might be safe. The cities are not safe, because it is to the cities that the disease have hit faster, because the cities are connected much better than some of the countryside spaces, and that's what we are dealing with. So the cities are much worse affected than the countryside. And this is precisely what was happening in the 16th century. So the people who lived in London suffered much more than the people who could run away to the countryside. When these deaths surpassed a certain number, what all was done? They banned assemblies, feasts, archery contests, and other forms of mass gathering. Now, this sounds so familiar. So all kinds of places where there is a great deal of physical contact were banned. And since it was believed that it was impossible to become infected during the act of worship, church services were not included in the ban. Now, this is also so familiar. It took a lot for the religious leaders to accept to the fact that the religious spaces of worship need to be shut. But again, we have recurrences. Whenever there is a religious function that needs to be celebrated, it's almost believed that the gods will not allow for people to die. It's okay if we open our temples and such like, our mosques, our temples and our churches, but yes, we need to keep other spaces shut. And since it was believed that it was impossible to become, so the church services were not included in the ban, though the infected were not permitted to attend. But the public theatres in London, which routinely brought together 2,000 or 3,000 people in an enclosed space, were ordered shut. And it would take many months before the death rate came down sufficiently for the authorities to allow the theaters to open. And Shakespeare himself faced two such major shutdowns during his time as a playwright. So the plays could not be staged because the London theatre had been shut down. So this is 1606 that I'm talking about. Deaths from the plague led to the closure of the theatres. And the disease reached the playwright's own house in London, and it was to change his professional life and the whole of drama forever. Yet, surprisingly, and this is truly surprising, that Shakespeare does not talk about the plague. One of the reasons, and this is a thought that I have, and of course all of you can counter me on this, and if there are Shakespeare scholars here, I would like to know what you think about it. Why did Shakespeare not talk about the plague? Now, one of the things I feel, the kind of writer that Shakespeare was, he wanted to take you, he wanted his audience to be enjoying the play. So he did not want to bring realism to such an extent. Remember, even though his plays were real, he wanted to sort of stage it in a different locale, say that this is not happening in London, and so on. You know, all of us have read Shakespeare, so we know how he's operated. So probably one of the reasons why, since he was so directly involved and suffering it, he thought maybe he spares the audience this. At no point of time in his theatre, he talks about shutting down of the theatres. That is not mentioned. The one mention that we find is in King Lear. And this is probably the only one mention of the plague that we find, is when he is abusing his daughter and he says, "Thou art a boil, a plague sore, an embossed carbuncle in my corrupted blood." So the whole thing of the blood being corrupted, and you are a plague sore, and you are a boil, and so on. Whereas the other contemporary of Shakespeare, somebody who unfortunately passed away very young, and he was a London wit, if you know, Ben Jonson, in The Alchemist, one of the most famous plays by Ben Jonson, in the very beginning of The Alchemist, he tells us that the owners of the house had relocated to the margins. They had gone to the countryside, and that is why the apartment is that is why the house is retained by one of their servants, and then the servant takes on the role of the master, and then what all happens. So The Alchemist has a very definite mention of the plague in its very beginning. So it tells us that this is a play that was happening during the plague, whereas somehow Shakespeare chooses not to mention it at any point of time. Okay, another person who does mention the plague is Thomas Nash. And again, this is the 16th century. I want to read out from his poetry. This was written in the summer of 1592. And he says, "Rich men, trust not in wealth. Gold cannot buy you health. Physic himself must fade. All things to end are made. The plague full swift goes by. I am sick, I must die. Lord, have mercy on us. Beauty is but a flower, which wrinkles will devour. Brightness falls from the air. Queens have died, young and fair. Dust hath closed Helen's eye. I am sick, I must die. Lord, have mercy on us." Now, isn't it something which is so resonant with what we are currently going through? So we know for a certainty that money, position, prestige in the society, and everything that we have held dear till now does not allow us any kind of a escape from the plague or from the pestilence or from the coronavirus, as the situation today is. So it does not see riches, it does not see your position, it affects the rich and the poor alike. And people who are rich and people who thought their riches earned them a very safe haven in life are now unfortunately being reminded that in the eyes of the plague, you're all the same. Yes, you might have the wherewithal to check into fancy hospitals or whatever else, which the poor does not have access to. But talk about the disease, it affects one and all. We don't have a choice here. Another lesson that literature teaches us. So constantly literature comments on the daily occurrences and teaches us lessons galore. It's a different story that we do not learn those lessons. So what is Thomas Nash trying to tell us? That don't be so proud. Don't be so proud of the fact that you have money, because when there is pestilence, when there is plague, your money is not going to help you. Your humanitarian values are. But unfortunately, people don't understand that. Okay. Now, this is, if you've not read it already, I would suggest you pick it up and read it immediately. I have skipped centuries now. So from the 16th century, now I've come to the 18th century. And a writer that you all are all familiar with, Daniel Defoe of the Robinson Crusoe fame, he wrote a journal of the plague year. This was 1722. And why did Defoe write this? He writes it for an express purpose. He tells us he's writing this because he wants people to understand that, God forbid, if the humankinds were ever to face any kind of pestilence, plague, and a pandemic, they should know what they're supposed to do. So like I said, the historicity is there, the writing is there. The experiences have been stacked for us so that we can learn a lesson. It's a different story. The humankind tends to forget very fast. So let me read from the Journal of the Plague. It's an account of a man's experiences in the year 1665, in which the bubonic plague had struck the city of London in what became known as the Great Plague of London, and the last epidemic of the plague in that city. The book is told somewhat chronologically, though without any sections or chapter headings, but with frequent digressions and repetitions. And what does he write? We had no such thing as printed newspapers in those days to spread rumors and reports of things and to improve them by the invention of men, as I have lived to see practiced since. So one of the set of people that Defoe seems to be taking to task are the people who relay the news, or from where your news comes from. And he says maybe it was just as well that the bubonic plague did not have printed newspapers the way people in the 18th century had. So one of the things that they were spared was a lot of misinformation and a lot of disinformation. This is something that we have seen. So on the one hand, we have the pandemic, and on the other hand, we have so much in terms of the media. There is so much misinformation and disinformation which is out there in the public, that for a long time, it takes a lot for people to be able to weed out what is correct and what is wrong. Who am I supposed to listen to? Who am I supposed to not listen to? So somebody will tell you, and they will show that person on TV, that person will come and tell you that, oh, you have this medicine and this is going to cure the corona. Or somebody will say drinking this is going to cure the corona. This will just go on. So for the common person to understand what they should do and what they should not do becomes terribly difficult. So he's what Defoe is saying, that maybe the people suffering from bubonic plague, and in Shakespeare's time, they were a happier lot. They didn't have to deal with newspapers. So and cut to the 21st century, you realize that we not only have the newspapers, we have news channels, and we have the social media, and we have God alone knows how many things. So there is that much of misinformation and disinformation which does the round, along with a lot of very sensible information and a lot of sensible things. So again, it is for the people, and that is where your education and your understanding and your scientific temperament comes to the fore. What are you taking and what are you leaving out? So people who are listening to epidemiologists, people who are listening to virologists, are listening to the right people. People who are listening to quacks and, let me not go there, are actually making a lot of wrong decisions. So that also was pointed out to us as early as 1722 by Defoe. So he was also telling us, what are you supposed to be doing in this stage? So Defoe's purpose for writing the novel was didactic. He wanted to preach, he wanted to teach. So what was he wanting to teach? So he says, I have set this particular down so fully because I know not, but it may be of moment to those who come after me if they came to be brought to the same distress. So what Defoe is telling us, that God forbid there is a time when history repeats itself and when the epidemics repeat themselves, this journal will come to use, and you will know what we are supposed to be doing. So we also have a written journal which tells us how to handle the plague. Okay. And then I read again. It must be confessed that though the plague was chiefly amongst the poor, yet were the poor the most venturous and fearless of it, and went about their employment with a sort of brutal courage. I must call it so, for it was founded neither on religion or prudence. Scarce did they use any caution, but run into any business which they could get employment in, though it was the most hazardous. Such was that of tending to the sick, watching houses shut up, carrying infected persons to the pest house, and, which was still worse, carrying the dead away to their graves. Now, this is something that you will totally understand. So, whenever there is any kind of a calamity, even when there is no calamity, we have a wonderful way. And when I say we now, I'm talking about, say, the upper middle class and the rich. We have a significant way of othering a large section of the people. So, what did we do this time? We suddenly closed the gates of our gated communities and we said no servant can come in, no driver can enter our gated communities, and so on and so forth, and thought that we were very safe. Who did we not close the gates to? To our relatives, our children, our friends and family who might be abroad, who were coming in till around the 15th, 16th of March and were walking straight into our houses. Before that, of course, they were coming. But we did not choose to shut the gates on those people, but we shut the gates on people who we immediately othered and said that you could be a carrier. Though we knew very well that the poor were not the carriers. The carriers were a different set of people altogether, but we did not shut our doors to those people. So that is where our class bias comes in so very strongly. We saw day after day, some people were generous. They paid their maid servants and drivers for first 3 months maybe, and then they decided that enough is enough. We cannot pay you any further. So we led them to yet another step of completely ruining careers of so many people. And we did it with so much nonchalance, so much ease. And yet, what did we see of these people? That if you were in trouble, the poor, the dispossessed, they were caring for each other. Even when they were forced to walk those kilometers back, we heard incredible stories of families helping each other, or people caring for their dear ones by taking them in cycles or by riding. Incredible stories coming out. Whereas what did the upper middle class and the rich do? We comfortably shut the doors and tried to keep ourselves safe. Did we succeed? Is a question that I want you to grapple with. I don't think we did, really. So, and then again, Defoe ends with a very, very cryptic kind of a quote. Wherever God erects a house of power, the devil builds a chapel there, and it will be found upon examination, the latter has the largest congregation. So there are more followers of the devil than of the God, so to say. Okay, so now with Defoe, I will also bring in Foucault. And we will continue to discuss the plague. All familiar names for you, Foucault. So Foucault's famous lectures, and it was based on, Defoe's writing. And we see this in 1975. And this is the lecture that he delivered at the Collège de Français in 75. And he's talking about I'm not going getting into third one, so I'm getting into two spaces. He's talking about the literary dream or the social dream and the political dream. So what is the literary dream or the social dream? He says that there is a literature of the decomposition of individuality, a kind of orgiastic dream in which plague is the moment when individuals come apart and when the law is forgotten. So because the plague is upon you, it is probably, it then becomes a space where individuals can rally round because the laws have become somewhat slack. The lawmakers are somewhat scared. I can see some hands being raised. I will, can we take the questions after the lecture is done? If that is okay with everyone? Just hold on to the thought and we can discuss it. Okay, and then of course comes the political dream. Now this is something that all of you will understand, that takes measures against the spreading of the disease as a complete imposition of the political power over the population and concretely over the individuals into which the population can be divided. So most often than not, what the politicians do during a kind of a situation where we are fighting a pandemic, the politicians abrogate more powers unto themselves because people are so fearful at that point of time. People are scared of rebutting and coming out and asking questions. So the politicians use this space to bring in stringent laws, to arrest people arbitrarily, to do all kinds of anti-social, if I may say, indulge in these kind of acts because they know that people are too caught up fighting the pandemic. And again, this is something which I don't think I need to elaborate. Just compare it with what you are seeing around you, the kind of news that you are seeing. If you are also reading between the lines, you will see how this was exactly what was said is happening today. So this abrogation of larger powers for oneself. Now the plague, according to the political dream, and I quote, the marvelous moment when political power is exercised to full. Plague is a moment when spatial partitioning and subdivision of a population is taken to its extreme point, where dangerous communications, disorderly communities, forbidden contacts can no longer appear. So what does it mean? People can't get together, people can't have meetings, people can't sit on dharnas, people can't protest because there is the pandemic raging. So what can the government do? The government can pick up whoever they please because the news channels are only talking pandemic. They're not telling you that social activists are being picked up and they are being jailed. And that bit is kept very quiet and nobody can, you can't come out onto the streets and protest and do anything because there is a pandemic which is raging. The moment of the plague is one of exhaustive sectioning. So what does it do? It sections people. Of the population of political power, the capillary ramifications of which constantly reach the brain of individuals themselves, their time, habitat, localization, and their bodies. So this is the time when you can exhaustively, the political power can very conveniently section its people, take complete, take complete you capture your people completely. Because at that point of time, the only news that is being spread is that there is the pandemic and you might die. So the mortality is so much upon us. The fear factor is so much upon us. We are very happy to give all our, rights to our political masters and say that, oh, please take care of us. And utilize your political lathi the way you wish to. And all political powers, and that's what Foucault is talking about, is the kind of repressive politics that we see during the times of the pandemic. Okay, I quote Foucault a little more. A whole literary fiction of the festival grew up around the plague. Suspended laws, lifted prohibitions, the frenzy of passing time, bodies mingling together without respect. But there was also a political dream of the plague, which was exactly the reverse. Not the collective festival, but the strict divisions, not laws transgressed, but the penetration of regulation into the smallest detail of everyday life. So, like I said, because there is the fear factor, the citizens are very happy to give up their privileges because they feel the state knows better. And the state seizes upon this situation to abrogate further powers where they want every detail of the individual. And later on, with this detail, they can section you. They will know. Today, they will say, okay, download an app. That app will tell you if people around you are infected. Tomorrow, that same app can be used to find out everything about you if you've already not given them the details. And then the details can be used to the convenience of whoever might be in the political power at that point of time. It is very easy. So this is what Foucault is kind of cautioning us and telling us. I now want you to see this brilliant depiction of death by Peter Bruegel. This is 1562. I'm going to enlarge this picture. See the kind of death, destruction, and trauma that you see around you. It's a very, very fearful picture, and I want you to register this picture because this is what a scene of death and destruction means, where people are dying like flies, as it were. And what a tremendous depiction this is. Okay. So another thing that is happening now is now I come to I again skip centuries a little. Now I bring you to the 19th century. And here we are talking about Mary Shelley and The Last Man. It was written in 1826. So what is The Last Man about? I'm sure many of you would have read it. And again, if you have not, please read. So it's incredible how, in 1826, Mary Shelley is talking about the apocalyptic dystopian science fiction, which she wrote at that point of time, which was first published in 1826. And it's kind of eerily sort of close to us. This book is describing a future Earth at the time of the late 21st century, ravaged by an unknown pandemic, which quickly sweeps through the world. It also includes a discussion of English culture as a republic, with Mary Shelley sitting in the meetings of the House of Commons to gain an insight into the governmental political system of the Romantic era. So it's kind of incredible how she could have imagined what she did. Now, The Last Man is probably the first piece of dystopic novel which was ever published. And it is debated amongst the literary critics whether The Last Man can be classified as a dystopic novel, as it excludes political themes of repression and totalitarianism. The novels which you hear more about, because they talk more about the repressions and the totalitarianism kind of government, and you must definitely read, if you've not already, George Orwell's 1984 or Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Now, these are must reads. So also, along with sensitizing you to the pandemic and the pandemic literature, if I may call it that way, pandemic, totalitarianism, dystopia literature, all of that is linked in such a fantastic fashion. So I did also try to create a kind of a reading list for you. And these are areas that you all can, young scholars, if we have amongst us, or people also wanting to do postdoc work, can look at. Okay, now I bring to you The Mask of Red Death. This is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, and this is 1842. So this short story, it follows Prince Prospero's attempt to avoid a dangerous plague. Now, there's a very interesting story where Prince Prospero is trying to run away from death. And the plague is called the Red Death. And he goes about hiding variously. And finally, he goes and hides in his abbey. And what else does he have? He has many wealthy nobles, and he hosts a masquerade ball in the 7 rooms of his abbey, each decorated with a different color. In the midst of their revelry, a mysterious figure disguised as a Red Death victim enters and makes his way through each of the rooms. Prospero dies after confronting the stranger, whose costume proves to contain nothing tangible inside it. And the guests also die in turn. So it's a story where a masquerade goes all wrong, where the plague comes dressed as one of the people taking part in this costume party, and then the way they are hunted down and they are killed. So the disease may have been inspired by tuberculosis or consumption, as it was known, since Poe's own wife, Virginia, was suffering from the disease at the time when the story was written. And Poe's mother, Eliza, brother William, foster mother Frances had also died of the tuberculosis. And alternatively, the Red Death may refer to cholera, because Edgar Allan Poe witnessed an epidemic of cholera in Maryland in 1831. So you have the various depictions. We are not told exactly who the Red Death is, but the Red Death is definitely someone who comes in as a stalker and who kills. And kills with great and gay abandon, as one would say. And I have a picture here which I want you to see, and I'm enlarging it. So that is your Red Death, and this is Prospero. Look at the way Prospero is dressed. You know, he even has a sword and he has an armor, and he feels that he can fight death, but nobody can fight death, and nobody can fight the plague. And look at the way Red Death looks now. There's blood dripping down, and it's a sinister kind of a face. And also the posture, the way the Red Death is standing tall, and the man is positioned on the ground, shows this complete sort of takeover from the death, as it were. Okay. Now, I think what I'll do very briefly, because many of you would have read some Indian literature, and one person you could never have missed is Rabindranath Tagore, our first Nobel laureate. Tagore has this brilliant poem called Puratam Britto, or The Old Servant. And I will read the English translation. It's not the best, but that's all that we have for people who do not read Bangla. This is a story about a servant who was hated by everyone. He was hated by his master, he was hated by his mistress, and throughout the day they said nasty things to him. And then one fine day, what happens? The master goes on a pilgrimage and the slave accompanies the master. And on this pilgrimage, the master gets infected by the Spanish flu, and the master starts to die. But the slave, instead of running away and leaving his master, nurses the master back to health. But what happens eventually is that he himself succumbs to it and he dies. So I will read out the few lines. Goblinesque of appearance, he was a fool beyond measure. Anything went missing, screamed the mistress. Keshto stole our treasure. From dawn till dusk, I swear on his father's name, barely any heed he paid. The caning exceeded his earning, yet witless was he, of such stuff he was made. Before long, regaining my health as I was up and about, the fever set upon him. My life-giver appropriated my fatal disease as each day his prospects grew dim. Losing consciousness, he lay there for a day or two until no pulse in him was left. For so long had I tried my all to be rid of him, and at long last of him I was bereft. So the master saying, all my life I wanted to drive him away from my house. I didn't like him. My wife didn't like him. We caned him. We didn't give him enough money. But it was he who took my disease and died while I managed to survive. So everything that we have been discussing till now, Tagore seems to have managed to put it in this absolutely scintillatingly heart-wrenching poem of his called Puraton Kritto, or The Old Slave. You'll find it on the internet. Yet another writer, poet, who I'm sure all of you are familiar with, Suryakant Tripathi Nirala. He called himself Nirala. So Nirala suffered hugely because of the Spanish influenza, and he wrote in his memoir, and the memoir was called A Life Misspent, and I quote from Nirala: "The Ganga was swollen with dead bodies. At my in-laws' house, I learned that my wife had passed away. Many other members of Nirala's family had also died. There wasn't enough wood to cremate them. This was the strangest time in my life," he recalled later. "My family disappeared in the blink of an eye. All our sharecroppers and laborers died. The four who worked for my cousin, as well as the two who worked for me. My cousin's eldest son was just 15 years old. My young daughter was just 1 year old. In whichever direction I turned, I saw darkness." These deaths were not a mere coincidence of personal tragedies visited upon the poet. They were connected to the Spanish influenza. For paucity of time, I'm not getting into the nitty-gritties of both Tagore and Nirala. I thought I will bring in some Indian literature just to sensitize you to the fact that there was a lot being written right here. So if you really want the history of plague, it's very much here. And it has been mentioned at all points of time how people were dying, how people, again, you could divide them in two categories: how there was one set of people helping, moving ahead, taking care, um, and how there was another set of people who stuck them, who sort of, only could think of their own well-being, who were exploitative, and who only thought about their own personal survival. So throughout centuries, nothing really seems to have changed. And we are again face to face with a similar situation. Now I come to a poet whom you all know, and I hope, like I personally love T.S. Eliot and his incredible The Wasteland. When you read The Wasteland, you understand everything that we have been discussing till now. Each and everything we seem to be encountering here. And I will quote a little, read a little from The Wasteland. "April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory with desire, stirring dull roots with the spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding with little time, with dried tubers. Summer surprised us. Coming over the Starnberge Sea, with a shower of rain, we stopped at the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour." So what you see in The Wasteland, we've been reading it for eons now. What we do see in The Wasteland is this complete wasted space that our minds, hearts, and bodies have become. Of course, it is also about the city. It's also about the wars that have been fought, which Eliot is critical of, the entire 20th century and what it represents. So all of this, how it has laid waste to us morally and personally, is for us to see in The Wasteland. And this is 1922 that I'm talking about. A background to this, very little. In 1918, humanity was just staggering out of the horrors of the World War when she was hit with the Spanish flu. So what did the World War tell us? The world, pandemic is something else. It's a disease that we are fighting. The World War was human beings attacking human beings, human beings maiming human beings throwing a nuclear bomb on another city and decimating a city and future generations. So the cruelty that human beings were capable of mounting on fellow human beings, that alongside the pandemic is an absolutely horrifying situation. And that is what Eliot means when he talks about the wasteland. So we came out of the World War and we were hit by the Spanish flu. By 1920, 500 million people had been infected and 50 million had died. More US soldiers perished from the flu than they were killed in the war. So the flu was a greater killer than what the World War had been. And probably one of the reasons why the wasteland was so fragmentary, so puzzling, and so maddening. Because life in 1920 was fragmentary, it was puzzling, and it was maddening. The war had solved nothing for us. The horrors of modern warfare and the devastation of the Spanish flu left poor old humanity punch drunk and reeling. The poem reads like a madman in a ruined museum trying to make sense of the artifacts. The pandemic of 2020 has given us a similar dose of reality. We've not emerged from a hellish world war. Instead, we are living in a Disneyland bubble of affluence and technological marvels. Now, this is where I draw the comparison that just before the pandemic hit us, we were living in this bubble of having arrived. What did we have to protect us? Or so we felt. We had science, technology, medicine, quacks, so-called doctors who could treat variously, everything. Plus, we had money, we had prowess, we had fancy cars. We thought we had arrived. And we thought that, with all that we now have, there is nothing that can dent us. And then comes the pandemic and tells us that what we were living with, all our technological marvels, was like a Disneyland bubble. A bubble which we had created around us because we felt so protected. And that protective bubble disappeared in a blink of an eye when we realized that we were pawns to this kind of a disease, and we had nothing. We were running like headless chickens. We could not survive. We could not take care of ourselves. We were in a sad state of dystopia, and it hit us suddenly. And then suddenly we realized that whether we were the richest people in the world, whether we were the most influential or whatever that we might be, the disease could get us all. And there was no saving us. So the only thing now, when we are faced with a situation like this, again, we have just two things that we can do. Either we can be humane, we can allow humanity to take over and caress and try to take the pain away from the pandemic, or we can be coercive, we can be dictatorial, we can be selfish, and so on. What literature has shown us till now is that constantly our writers, poets, short story writers, and everyone seems to be telling us what we need to show is our human side. But what we'll end up showing mainly as a society is being completely inhuman, is our dictatorial side. And that has become the undoing. So on the one hand, there is the undoing of the disease, and on the other hand, there is the undoing of humanity, which is happening parallelly. And of course, like I'm saying, there are always these extraordinary stories of extraordinary people who are out there, who are keeping humanity alive on our behalves, if I may put it that way. Okay. Now, these lines, again, I say them because they are so reminiscent of our contemporary times. Just mull over these lines. The lines are something that you know, but if you try to now read these lines, keeping the pandemic and the chaos around you in mind, I think they will have a different, they'll talk differently to you. So just allow me to read yet again lines with which you all are familiar. And I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust, under the brown fog of a winter dawn. A crowd flowed over London Bridge, so many. I had not thought death had undone so many. Think about it in our contemporary scenario. Another poem, very close to our hearts, very well known to each one of us, but I feel in today's day and age, it speaks so directly to our contemporary situation. So in November 1918, at the height of the pandemic's deadly second wave, Yeats watched helplessly as his pregnant wife, George, struggled to fight off the virus in their rented house in Dublin. Outside, the pandemic was sweeping through the city. The countryside where Yeats uh, thought of taking George offered no escape. Already overrun with funerals and with bodies, before it was over, the flu would infect around 600, between 600,000 to 800,000 people in Ireland and kill far more than were lost in the internal political violence that was also consuming the country. So you always have, you have the plague and you have the political situation, each impacting upon the other in a very symbiotic fashion. So there is the war outside and there is the war inside, which is constantly happening. And for Yeats, it was a devastating time. His heavily pregnant wife, he wanted to run away with her. He wanted to protect her. He had found out this house in the countryside where he would be moving with her. But unfortunately, none of that could happen. And she was lost. The child was gone along with her. So, and then you have this very, very interesting, The Second Coming, a poem I know all of you all are familiar with, but allow me to read it for you. Now I want you to read it, keeping the current situation in mind. And I think then it evolves in a different manner for us. Okay. So what are the lessons before I go into the reading of Yeats? What are the lessons which I feel the pandemic has taught us? One, of course, is the criticism of avariciousness, greed and more greed and more greed that humankind has gotten so used to. The pandemic tells us, what are you going to do with your greed? I can affect you and I can kill you. What are you going to do with your 2-3 houses that you have built? Show some generosity instead. The second thing, rushing to the city for more money. That now we have been seeing this for years together, for centuries, as it were. People would come to the city to seek more money. Instead, what are they leaving the city with? With disease. A complete sense of callousness towards each other. Lack of humanity, lack of, any kind of sense of camaraderie towards a fellow human being. What are we doing the minute we learn somebody has got the COVID in our vicinity? We want to drive that entire family away, as far into the Antarctic ocean, if that is possible. So complete and total callousness that each one of us seems to be showing when the calamity has struck us, instead of displaying humanity, which our writers and poets have been constantly telling us. There is a plea for empathy and for humanitarian values. And there is a plea which is constant for respecting nature. We did not think anything of nature when we took over and destroyed nature, and we are still doing it, interestingly. The plague, the pestilence, the pandemic has not taught us a lesson even today. We are still taking everything for granted. In a sense, we are waiting the day the government says it's kind of over, and we will do the exact same things that we were doing. All the lessons that have been taught to us by all our writers somehow seem to have been completely lost on us, very sadly so. And then I read and I conclude. So I request all of you to start writing your questions if you want me to answer anything while I read this. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming, hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight somewhere in sands of the desert. A shape with lion body and a head of a man, a glaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs while all about it, real shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know the 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. Terrifying lines of Yeats. Now, I want you to, you've read it, all of us know the second coming, read it, keeping the pandemic in mind, keeping the terrifying social conditions in mind. And I want to end with this incredibly scary yet telling picture by William Blake, a kind of a depiction for what Yeats is to write later. I want you to hold on to this picture. I want you to understand Blake in a manner that we had probably never thought to look at him earlier. I end here now and over to the organizers, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, ma'am. I would now request Dr. Rupa Shah, ma'am, to kindly coordinate the question answer session.
Ma'am, it was indeed a beautiful session. And some of the participants said it was exhaustive, but the best session. And yes, it was full of information. It was really informative. There are a few questions.
Sure.
Ripunjoy has asked you a question, ma'am. He said, I'm Ripunjoy from Assam. As you know, we are in the northeastern part of India. Now, in Indian English writing, we have authors from almost all the states of India, but unfortunately, I think excluding Indira Goswami, no one's name has been taken here, and so-called mainland writers labeled a term Northeast literature to us. Authors like Temsula has shown discomfort to this division of same literature. It is the politics, as Northeast India has several prolific writers. What is the opinion on this? Is this division proper? If yes, how and why?
Ripunja, I couldn't agree more. I'm completely in agreement with you. Yes, shame on us. Shame on all of us doing literary studies here. You mentioned Temsula. I could mention many others. Again, I have somehow been interested in Assamese literature because I've known some amazing writers from there. But I completely agree with you that there is a wealth of writing out there, and somehow we have not been able to mainstream it. Now, whenever I hear something like this, I always want to say a counter thing to this. The counter would be, instead of sitting and blaming people for not having done the right thing by these writers, it's for us to do it. Let us do it, Ripunjoy. I'll be very happy. If you start, if you have a conference on Assamese writers, let us not call them Northeastern writers, because the Northeast is so different from one part you travel to the other. It is a different tribe with a different language. We have done this utter sacrilege of bringing everybody under the same rubric. It does not work. So I would be, in fact, so many Assamese people are here. This is so wonderful that all of you are here. Let us, and I'm assuring you on a public platform, if you do a conference on any writer from your part of the world, from Delhi University, I assure you support. I personally am interested, so I will be part of it, and I will ensure many of my students and my colleagues are part of it. So let us correct the wrong. Let us, instead of saying that, oh, yes, I know the wrong has been done. I'm guilty, I'm ashamed. But also parallelly, let me say, let us resurrect and correct ourselves from making that mistake in future. I hope that answers you, Ripunjoy.
So true. I would like to talk about it, Ripunjoy, on a personal chat, of course. Right now, Dr. Jeevan Kumar has got another question. Ma'am, thank you very much for your enlightening presentation that made us float among the texts that were written on epidemics, pandemics. My question is, what was the impact of those texts on the society during those periods? And can we expect any text describing the present pandemic in the near future so that we can learn lessons from the text and see a new normal?
Again, a very valid question. You know, the problem with us is that we are a set of people who like to forget things very fast. You know, we don't react to a situation unless and until it affects us. We are extremely selfish that way. And we also are great ones at forgetting things. So, see, all this wealth of literature was there. Did we learn any lesson? Some would have, some would not have. So, today also, let us say, I'm sure there will be a lot of writing coming from the pandemic. Will we learn lessons? That is for each one of us individually. Some of us will, some of us won't. So again, you know, we can't say that, yes, the humanity or people at large will learn a lesson. We don't know. We hope so. We can only hope.
Ma'am, there is another question by Pavitr Singh. Do you think do you think Shakespeare was right that he has not written on pandemic at that time?
Who am I to judge what Shakespeare did or didn't do? I don't know. See, again with Shakespeare, he he was, I'm going to say the most sacrilegious thing here. I always look at Shakespeare as the David Dhawan of our times, you know. So his idea was to entertain. Entertainment, entertainment, entertainment. So entertainment, 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 you don't want to talk pandemic. But and remember, Shakespeare was extremely popular. He was an extremely popular writer. So if he had been like the university wits, if he had been like Marlowe, if he had been like Ben Jonson, he might not have been that popular. See, a David Dhawan or a certain kind of filmmaker sells, whereas a certain serious filmmaker does not sell. So the saleability of a product is again on the people, on the people who are watching it, or on the people who are going to the theater. And remember, the theaters, very like our theaters, were geared to making money. It wasn't just to give you a great feast. It was also to sustain that theater. So money making was an important part. Currently, why have the theaters died out while cinema sells? Because the theaters have died out because there are no takers. Why has the circus died out? So, you know, these are things that we need to think about. And yeah, I mean, yeah, tell me. Somebody was saying something. Dr. Rupa, I'll just make a request. Can I get a copy of the chat later on? Because
Yes.
I've not had.
We generally used to send the unattended questions and
Okay.
even the chats.
Okay, thanks.
There's one question by Dr. Vrinda. Ma'am, could you please comment on the depiction of plague and other pandemics as disfigured humans in literature and painting, especially in the light of disability studies?
This question has come to me before also, because disability studies, I'm so happy, is now currently the buzzword. Um, so when we read these, the ones that I mentioned, uh, these are not your standard texts for looking at disability studies per se, because here we are talking about death, destruction, and the pandemic. But characters with disabilities have always been there. That thread has always been there through literature. Sometimes they have been looked at with great deal of sympathy. Sometimes they have been completely overlooked. Sometimes they have been treated as just another character. Like if we are talking about our, if you're talking about Indian myths and epics and so on, you have a saint called Ashtavakra. Ashtavakra was bent in 8 places. But he's just mentioned as one guy who was different to look at. Not much thought beyond that has gone. And he was a great saint. That is all that we get to know. Kind of shunned by the society. So I'm afraid I can't give you exact characters that you can use as part of the disability discourse. But yes, what you can totally use in terms of your disability discourse is that, the disability is looked at in the earlier times, if in the Sophoclean times and such like, as something which was like a curse. Now, in the contemporary understanding of the discipline, it makes sense for us to argue that nothing of the sort is really true. And it is a certain kind of special ability that people have. So that understanding has come to us only now. So I'm afraid I really can't give you names of characters who you can use, but you can use the general discourse and show how at that point of time the understanding was that it happened because of a curse from God or whatever else that there was. And of course, all the time, including even today, there is this sense of not being able to accept the person. That person might have the highest state of mental ability, but a slight physical disability, and our society is so callous, so disgusting in its exclusion, which really needs to be fought. Yet another area where we need to fight. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great, ma'am. Anuj has a question. He would like to know parents' role in new normal.
I'm not a psychiatrist, but I feel the parents need to be as realistic as is possible. If you're trying to hide something, if you are pretending that all is well, you are being foolish, and you are treating your children as foolish people, which they are not. Also, parents need to be human themselves. So if the child a child learns not from what you're telling the child, but what the child is seeing you do. So if the child is seeing how you treat your maidservant and your drivers, and you treat them as untouchables suddenly, people who made your life so beautiful till today. So the fact that I can sit here for 2 hours today with you all is because there's someone else taking care of my household. I know I'm going to get my lunch for doing nothing. Instead of being grateful to that person, if I start to treat that person as the other, my child will end up learning distasteful things. So as parents, if you have young children, whether you have grown-up kids or young kids, I would advise you, for heaven's sake, be human and treat them just as you would treat another friend. Talk to them. Be calm yourself. One of the stupidest things that we do is we'll end up panicking. We panic so much that our kids also start panicking. Panicking is not going to help us here. Be focused, be positive minded, and most importantly, be a good human being. Your kids are going to be happy, good human beings. That is all that I will say to all of you. But if you're panicking, if you are adding your panic onto the household, sometimes the spaces are small. Sometimes there's overcrowding in the house. Sometimes there's lack of tablets. Everybody does not have enough gadgets. Be very mindful of these things. And also, to all of us who have the wherewithal to spend 2 hours, or in your case, many more hours, in this kind of an academic, discourse, understand your privileges. Say a big thank you, not to God, but to nature or whatever else that you might have around you, to your spouse, to your children, to people around you, for letting you have this wonderful time, because they have taken it out of their schedule and they've given you this time. So that will add to your happiness, which will add to the happiness quotient in the house. I can see Dr. Rupa panicking. Probably we are landing. As an organizer, I can completely understand her concerns. The new session needs to start. So yeah, I'll leave it.
No, ma'am. It's really very interactive and nice session, no doubt. But as we are running out of time, I would like to take up the last question by Dr. Malvika. The question is, do you agree that carelessness is opposite to the consciousness among youths?
tough one. Carelessness as opposed to consciousness. I don't know. I mean, I find it very difficult to talk about the youth as, you know, I know I'm not the youth, but I think in my mind I'm terribly youthful. So I, again, would not other the youth. You know, we are as careless as we are careful or whatever else that we might be. In order to, I presume your question is coming from a point as in how to keep the young favorably occupied. I think the only way we can do it is to keep ourselves very favorably occupied. If I'm reading a book, my child will pick up a book to read. If I'm creating content, I can, slowly encourage my child to create content. If I'm spending my entire day watching Netflix, how can I stop my child from watching Netflix? You know, if I'm on the phone 24/7, how can I tell my child don't do it? And if I'm short tempered, how can I tell my child don't be short tempered? So I keep saying, it begins with you. Everything begins with you. If you are able to keep your smile on, if you are able to do what it takes to keep your head above water and to help other people keep their heads above water in times of crisis, your family will do the same. If you are the panicky types, if you are the one creating a lot of nuisance, or if you are the one who's saying, "मैं क्या करूं, मैं क्या," you know, पूरा family वैसा करेगा. If you are the kinds who's fighting with your husband 24/7 and vice versa, घर में कलेश होगी. So, you know, it all begins and ends with you. So if you read Daniel Defoe, understand Daniel Defoe, and accept, or read Camus, your family will shape up in a certain manner. Do it with your children. Believe you me, you'll benefit enormously. I'll end here now. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for all the wonderful comments. And I'll ask Dr. Rupa to send it to me.
Yes, yes, of course, we are going to send it to you. It was really a mesmerizing session. It was mind-blowing session, and that's really great. We knew different genres, and we knew different pandemic literature through your really great great lecture. And I hope that everyone is benefited by this lecture. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much. Now, this is the end of the session. I would like Professor Abra to go ahead with vote of thanks. Ma'am, stay with us for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Nandini ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Rupa ma'am. Nandini ma'am has expressed a lot of things and opened a new era of research, I believe. That's my opinion, but still it was a great session. Now I request Dr. Hira Manna Das to officially give the vote of thanks for this technical session.
Okay. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Respected resource person, respected organizer, and the esteemed participants. I am Hiramanna Das from Assam University Defoe campus. First of all, I am extending my heartfelt thanks to the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity to deliver the vote of thanks of this session. On behalf of the organizing committee and the participants, we are very much thankful to the resource person, Dr. Nandini Sen ma'am, spending her valuable time and sharing her thoughts with us. It was really a very informative and insightful session. We are very much lucky to have you as a resource person in this FDP. Your thought-provoking lecture has provided us with lots of information about the subject. We are also very much thankful to all the participants for their patient hearing. At last, as a participant, I extend my heartfelt thanks towards the organizing committee to arrange such a wonderful FDP and provide us the platform to share our thoughts. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that lovely, valedictory or whatever that end. And thanks, Dr. Rupa. Thank you, sir. It's been my privilege and honor to be amongst all of you. And if I've been able to, I can now see Hira Manna Dash, lovely young lady you Yes, my privilege entirely. And if I've been able to put you all through a new area of research, it would be my privilege. And for me also, it's work in progress. So this is an area that I'm working on at the moment, thanks to the pandemic. And I'll be hopefully able to share my book with you all shortly. And thank you so much for having me with us. It's been an honor and a privilege. I'll sign off now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Hiramanna Das, ma'am. Thank you, Nandini,
Thank you,
ma'am.
sir.
So participants, we come to the end of today's technical sessions. Day 5 of the FDP is over. Uh, uh, Rupa ma'am, any instructions to be given to the candidates?
The candidates should complete their assignments, as yesterday and today we are not giving them, we are not burdening them with lots of assignments and lots of writing. There are 2 forms that they have to fill up, and that's all. So it will be very easy for all of you to go ahead with the assignments, and I hope that all of you are going to get a good takeaway from this uh, beautiful FDP. I hope that if you have, you're very comfortable with all the things which are going on right now. If you have got any suggestion, any problem, please feel free to ask your mentors or talk to me directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a great session today. I guess with less technical glitches, our participants would agree to that. Thank you all participants for being so patient, and we have concluded exactly in 2 hours time. It's 14:05 hours, so we are right on time. Thank you all. Have a great day ahead and expect your assignments to be submitted. So I'll be signing off right now. Tomorrow sharp at 11 a.m. we'll start the session. I request all attendees to log in by around 10:50 so that we can do it in a more planned way. Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Have a great day.